Okay. I think we can. I think we can go ahead and get started. Ah, there's something in my eye. Ah, the there's something in my eye. Okay, eyelash, got it. Hello, folks. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Oh, stretching. Getting those multiple pops in my back. New record to Dunita. Yeah, I fucking die speed run. Any percent. Tool assisted. uh so let's see. So first stream we did was a Goosebump stream. That was really fun and campy. Second stream we did was the Koji Suzuki Dark Water short story collection. That got really uncomfortably intense. So I figured today we'll go for a classic, and I figure I could do some Lovecraft stories. Uh, yes, this dude is a racist old weirdo, but you know he kicked off the genre of cosmic horror, and I like cosmic horror. I like dumb bullshit like that, and we will take absolutely every opportunity to dunk on this on this dead old weirdo. Um, but yeah, I think that's pretty much what we're doing today. I will say, just real quick, I will share this with you all. Uh, just for giggles, I made another little reader avatar. I made my goat just kind of for fun. He just looks like a potato. He's a potate. He's just a little potato boy. I gave him. He's got some snack. I give him snack. We've got him with his book. Um, poofies, cheese poofies. He's got his cheese poofies. The only thing that bugs me. Oh crap! Wrong thing. Crap, the wrong part. A cool book for smart people. Um, the only thing about him is that I feel like he doesn't really match like the rest of the aesthetics of this of like the scene. But what I am pondering is if I want to just lean into the fact that I like changing my character all the time and make like a handful of these little potato stream avatar goobers, and then we would probably have like a character select on the start screen here, and I'm thinking that then I would just like pick whatever character that I want to have. More goobers, more gooders. Uh, but yeah, so that's kind of what. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about having like a little character select. That way, I could kind of play into me having all these different characters that I like to play around with. Uh, because as always, we would still have uh, the captain is still here. Um, but yeah, like I said, that way we could kind of like change some stuff around. And then I'm also thinking maybe I'll make like some other backgrounds we could switch between, and it would be like, oh, now we're in the reading room. Oh, now we're in a gothic castle. Why? Don't think about it. Just don't worry about it. Don't think about it. But we'll see. That's kind of a project to work on over time. I was sitting here like, oh, I should do I should do I should redo my entire stream like 24 hours before I intend to do another stream. And I'm like, no, it took me 2 weeks to do all of this. It's gonna take forever. Well, not only that, but it'll look like absolute bonk if I try to rush it out. Because like even the little goat potato, uh, let me bring him back out one more time. Even the goat potato, I think that as fun as he is, he's still rather whoopsie. He's still rather simple comparative to the isopod, comparative to the captain. Art is art. Also, I can make him do this. Wait, can I just like... He's hopping away. Anyway. Potato dance. Okay. Anyway. I don't know. Do I want to keep him out? Maybe I'll keep him out for this. Maybe I'll keep him out for this stream. Maybe I'll keep him out. I like looking at him. I put so much time into that isopod, though, so I feel bad not using him. And it also looks a little weird that I just have this potato goat in the underwater when, like, the icon and the start screen and the end screen have the isopod on it. Man, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? Okay, you know what? Hang out right there. We're gonna go to the internet briefly. I need like a coin toss generator. Okay, heads, we stick with the goat. Tails, we go for the urchin. Tails, urchin, heads, goat. Tails, urchin. All right, we're going back to the urchin. I mean urchin. I mean the isopod. That's what I meant. Whoa! I just realized I'm incredibly, I'm super transparent when I'm on here. Whoa! That's wait. Does that happen with the isopod too? Whoopsie. I think I'm breaking everything. Am I breaking everything? Is everything being broken? No. No, everything is fine. Everything is fine. Nothing is wrong. Where am I? Actually, everything is 100% wrong. God damn it. Hold on. Hold on a sec. I gotta change the transparency filter. Okay, there we go. All right, we're back. Oh boy. Okay. All right. let me zoom up onto my chair. Let me get up here. Let me get my book out. Let me get comfortable here. So last time we were streaming, I remember I think one or two people commented that the underwater noises were a little distracting. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think these streams need the underwater background noise? Or do you think that we should just kind of do away with it? Soft background is good? Okay. I was looking at some other ones that might be, like, maybe just a little better. But a lot of them, whenever I look up, like, ship or boat ambience, like, it's usually, like, above water. And it's, or there was one that was, like, a pirate ship that sounded pretty good, but it was all, like, wood and stuff. And I'm like, my ship's not made of wood. But I am gonna keep the background noise still relatively low. What happened to go? I flipped a coin to decide if I wanted to have the goat potato out or if I want to have the potato, the isopod out, and the isopod won out, so he's here. Just a constant accordion riff. Just put on the most annoying background noise possible. Okay. I lost track of what I was doing. Hold on, I spaced out. I lost track of what I was doing. But yeah, so if anybody doesn't want the ocean noise, let me know. I don't actually think I need to do my usual, like, copyright spiel, because I'm pretty sure Lovecraft is public domain. Or at least, like, if I read it, no one's really gonna come after me, because no one gives a shit. No one cares. Though I do have like a physical edition of the book here of Dunwich Horror. What? When was this? When was this printed? Yeah, I have one here that's from like 1963. We have a couple of like old books hanging around that my partner likes to collect, and he got this for me as like a birthday gift. It was a uh, a first edition of the Dunwich Horror and Others. Let me skip ahead a few pages. I don't really need to read this forward. Okay. All right. Everybody get settled in. Everybody get your snacks. Everybody get your drinks. Everybody settle on in. We're gonna read from this old racist weirdo who unfortunately created my favorite genre of horror. All right. So we're gonna start with In the Vault. There's nothing more absurd, as I view it, than the conventional association of the homely and the wholesome, which seems to pervade the psychology of the multitude. Mention a bucolic Yankee setting, a bungling and thick-fibered village undertaker, and a careless mishap in a tomb, and no average reader can be brought to expect more than a hearty, albeit grotesque phase of comedy. God knows, though, that the prosy tale which George Birch's death permits me to tell has in its aspects, beside which some of our darkest tragedies are like. Birch acquired a limitation and changed his business in 1881, yet never discussed the case when he could avoid it. Neither did his old physician, Dr. Davis, who died years ago. It was generally stated that the affliction and shock were the results of an unlucky slip, whereby Birch had locked himself for 9 hours in the receiving tomb of Peck Valley Cemetery, escaping only by crude and disastrous mechanical means. But while this much was undoubtedly true, there were other and blacker things which the man used to whisper to me in his drunken delirium toward the last. He confided in me because I was his doctor, and because he probably felt the need of confiding in someone else after Davis had died. He was a bachelor, wholly without relatives. Birch, before 1881, had been the village undertaker of Peck Valley, and was a very calloused and primitive specimen, as even such specimens go. You're an asshole. Shut up. Don't describe people as primitive. Because the thing is like I like if it was just like the first person reading this, they would probably be like, "Oh, okay, he's just describing them as kind of like I don't know, like big and hairy and like blue collar." But when Lovecraft describes someone as primitive, it's it probably means something else. Where did I lost my place? The practices I heard attributed to him would be unbelievable today, at least in the city, and even Peck Valley would have shuddered a bit had it known the easy ethics of its mortuary artist in such debatable matters as the ownership of the costly laying out apparel invisible beneath the casket's lid, and the degree of dignity to be maintained in posing and adapting the unseen members of lifeless tenants to the containers not always calculated with the sublimest accuracy. Most distinctly, Birch was lax, insensitive, and professionally undesirable. I want professionally undesirable on my business cards. H.P. Lovecraft, the man of racism. More like hatecraft. Here's your reminder that there was that weirdly intense Scooby Doo cartoon that actually had a character named Professor Hatecraft in it. That's also the show that had like weird fucking Nazi robots that killed someone. I'm so professionally undesirable. I don't have business cards. Right? Oh my god. That Scooby Doo show was fucking something. Where was I? Lax, insensitive, and professionally undesirable. Yet I still think he was not an evil man. He was merely crass of fiber and function, thoughtless, careless, and licorice. As his easily avoidable accident proves, and without the modicum of imagination which holds the average citizen within certain limits fixed by taste. Uh, They have robots. I only saw season one. Oh god, yeah, the last season of like Scooby Doo, like Mystery Inc. or whatever. It was, yeah, they were straight up like Killzone Nazi robots. It's insane. Like they're like, oh, the reason we have talking animals is because of a cosmic horror eldritch god. And there's like an evil bird that like six Nazi robots on people, and like a girl gets killed. It's nuts. Just where to begin Birch's story, I can hardly decide, since I am no practiced teller of tales. I suppose one should start in the cold December of 1880, when the ground froze and the cemetery delvers found they could dig no more graves till spring. Fortunately, the village was small and the death rate low, so that it was possible to give all of Birch's inanimate charges a temporary haven in the single antiquated receiving tomb. The undertaker grew doubly lethargic in the bitter weather, and seemed to outdo even himself in carelessness. Never did he knock together flimsier and ungainlier caskets, or disregard more flagrantly than needs the rusty lock on the tomb door, which he slant open and shut with such nonchalant abandon. At last the spring thaw came, and graves were laboriously prepared for the 9 silent harvests of the grim reaper, which waited in the tomb. Birch, though dreading the bother of removal and interment, began his task of transference one disagreeable April morning, but ceased before noon because of a heavy rain that seemed to irritate his horse. After having laid but one mortal tenant to its permanent rest, that was Darius Peck, the non-genarian. Nonagenarian? What the hell is a nonagenarian? Hold on. Hold on. We're going to the internet. I have to look up what the hell this means. How do I spell this? Nonagenarian. Nonagenarian. A person who is from 90 to 99 years old. Huh. Okay. Okay. Yeah, alright. Nonagenarian. Like an octogenarian, or like, okay, so nonagenarian is what would come after that. Where am I? There I am. Back to the book. Old person. Okay. Simple definition. Old. Da, 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 da. Birch decided that he would begin the next day with little old Matthew Fenner, whose grave was also nearby, but actually postponed the matter for 3 days, not getting to work till Good Friday, the 15th. Being without superstition, he did not heed the day at all, though ever afterward he refused to do anything of importance on that fateful 6th day of the week. Certainly the events of that evening greatly changed George Birch. On the afternoon of Friday, April 15th, then, Birch set out for the tomb, with horse and wagon to transfer the body of Matthew Fenner. That he was not perfectly sober, he subsequently admitted, though he had not taken to the wholesale drinking by which he later tried to forget certain things. He was just dizzy and careless enough to annoy a sensitive horse, which, as he drew it viciously up at the tomb, neighed and pawed and tossed its head. Much as on the former occasion when the rain had vexed it, the day was clear, but a high wind had sprung up, and Birch was glad to get to shelter as he unlocked the iron door and entered the side-hill vault. Another might not have relished the damp, odorous chamber with the 8 carelessly placed coffins, but Birch in those days was insensitive and was concerned only in getting the right coffin for the right grave. He had not forgotten the criticism aroused when Hannah Bixby's relatives, wishing to transport her body to the cemetery in the city whither they had moved, found the casket of Judge Capwell beneath her headstone. The light was dim, but Birch's sight was good, and he did not get Asaph Sawyer's coffin by mistake, although it looked very similar. He had indeed made that coffin for Matthew Fenner, but had cast it aside at last as too awkward and flimsy, in a fit of curious sentimentality aroused by recalling how kindly and generous the little old man had been to him during his bankruptcy 5 years before. He gave old Matt the very best his skill could produce, but was thrifty enough to save the rejected specimen, and to use it when Aesop Sawyer died of a malignant fever. Sawyer was not a lovable man, and many stories were told of his almost inhuman vindictiveness and tenacious memory for wrongs real or fancied. To him, Birch had felt no compunction in assigning the carelessly made coffin which he now pushed out of the way in his quest for the Fenner casket. It was just as he had recognized old Matt's coffin that the door slammed into the wind, leaving him in a dusk even deeper than before. Oh boy, oh Lovecraft writes a real word salad. I gotta tell you, I knew it was gonna be very wordy, but like, oof. Mm. Also, which story? Yeah, it's the vault. Oof. The narrow transom admitted only the feeblest of rays, and the overhead ventilation funnel virtually none at all, so that he was reduced to a profane fumbling as he made his halting way among the long boxes towards the latch. In this funeral twilight, he rattled the rusty handles, pushed at the iron panels, and wondered why the massive portal had grown so suddenly wait a minute, hold on. So suddenly recalcitrant. Recalcitrant. This isn't a real word. He made this up. Lovecraft makes up words. Recalcitrant's not real. That's not real. You made that up. In this in this twilight too, he began to realize the truth and to shout loudly as if his horse outside could do more than neigh and unsympathetically reply. Recalcitrant? Yeah. Recalcitrant. Recalcitrant? Recalcitrant. Yes. Though it's spelled with an A before the end rather than an E. Uh, sorry, I was gonna make a joke about his horse not giving a shit, and then I forgot where it was. Having an obstinately uncooperative attitude towards authority or justice. I can't even read the chat, guys. I can't read. I can't even read the chat. I can't read words. I'm trying to read. I'm trying to read a guy who's super wordy. I'm gonna fumble over everything. I give up. Never mind. Stream's over. Everyone go home. I can't read. I'm just kidding. I'm getting back in the chair. Let's keep going. I lost my place. uh, In this twilight, too, he began to realize the truth and to shout loudly as if his horse outside could do more than neigh an unsympathetic reply. For the long neglected latch was obviously broken, leaving the careless undertaker trapped in the vault, a victim of his own oversight. The thing must have happened at about 3:30 in the afternoon. Birch, being by temperament phlegmatic and practical, did not shout long, but proceeded to grope about for some tools which he recalled seeing in a corner of the tomb. It is doubtful whether he was touched at all by the horror and exquisite weirdness of his position, but the bald fact of imprisonment so far from the daily paths of men was enough to exasperate him thoroughly. His day's work was sadly interrupted, and unless chance presently brought some rambler hither, he might have to remain all night or longer. The pile of tools soon reached, and a hammer and chisel selected, Birch returned over the coffins to the door. The air had begun to be exceedingly unwholesome, but to this detail he paid no attention as he toiled, half by feeling, at the heavy and corroded metal of the latch. He would have given much for a lantern or a bit of a candle, but lacking these, bungled semi-sightlessly as best he might. When he perceived that the latch was hopelessly unyielding, at least to such meager tools and under such tenebrous conditions as these, Birch glanced about for another possible point of escape. The vault had been dug from a hillside, so that narrow ventilation funnel in that ran that so that narrow ventilation funnel in the top ran through several feet of earth, making this direction utterly useless to consider. Over the door, however, the high slit-like transom in the brick facade gave promise of a possible enlargement to the diligent worker. Hence, upon his eyes long rested as he racked his brains for a means to reach it. There was nothing like a ladder in the tomb, and the coffin niches on the side and rear, which Birch seldom took the trouble to use, afforded no ascent to the space above the door. Only the coffins themselves remained as potential stepping stones, and as he considered these, he speculated on the best mode of arranging them. 3 coffin heights, he reckoned, would permit him to reach the transom, but he could do better with 4. The boxes were fairly even and could be piled up like blocks. He could just do some Minecraft. He would just, he would just pick up the coffin and then set it down, and then he would jump on top of it, and he would like do a little hop and then put another coffin down, do a little hop and then put a little coffin down. That's how the pros do it. That's the pro strats. We're getting buried alive. It's like a paying half attention. That's what reading Lovecraft is like. I'm reading it, and I feel like I'm paying half attention. It's difficult. But no, so like in a nutshell, our watch me describe the entire plot of this in like 5 seconds versus his like 50 pages. It's a guy who is it's like an undertaker who's stuck in a tomb, and he's kind of a lazy asshole who's like not very good at his job, and now he's stuck in there, and he's about to try and stack the coffins on top of each other so that he can reach like a hole above the door and climb out. I'm gonna be, after every one of these stories, I'm gonna be like, okay, so here's what actually happened. Why use 10 words when why use a consecutive of 10 vocationally usable words in sentences when a few thousand vocational verbalizations could do the job even much more complicatedly? What could possibly go wrong? He speculated on the best mode of arranging. 3 coffin heights, he reckoned, would permit him to reach the transom, but he could do no better with 4. The boxes were fairly even. But he could do better with 4. The boxes were fairly even and could be piled up like blocks, so he began to compute how he might most stably use the 8 to rear a scalable platform 4D. As he planned, he could not but wish that the units of his contemplated staircase had been more securely made. Whether he had imagination enough to wish they were empty is strongly to be doubted. Finally, he decided to lay a base of 3 parallel with the wall, to place upon this 2 layers of 2 each, and upon these a single box to serve as a platform. This arrangement could be ascended with the minimum of awkwardness, and would furnish to the desired height. Better still, though, he would utilize only 2 boxes of the base to support the superstructure, leaving one free to be piled on top in case of the actual feat of escape. Oh my god, this is hard. Oof. The arrangement could be ascended with a minimum of awkwardness, and would furnish the desired height. Better still, though, he would utilize only 2 boxes at the base to support the superstructure, leaving one free to be piled on top, in case the actual feat of escape required an even greater altitude. And so the prisoner toiled in the twilight, heaving the unresponsive remnants of mortality with little ceremony as his miniature Tower of Babel rose course by course. Several of his coffins began to split under the stress it handled, and he planned to save the stoutly built casket of little Matthew Fenner for the top, in order that his feet might have as certain a surface as possible. In the semi-gloom, he trusted mostly to touch to select the right one, and indeed came upon it almost by accident, since it tumbled into his hands as if though some odd volition, after he had unwittingly placed it beside another on the 3rd layer. The tower at length finished, and his aching arms rested by a pause during which he sat on the bottom step of his grim device. Birch cautiously ascended with his tools and stood abreast of the narrow transom. The borders of the space were entirely of brick, and there seemed little doubt but that he could shortly chisel away enough to allow his body to pass. As his hammer blows began to fall, the horse outside whinnied in a tone which may have been encouraging and may have been mocking. The horse is outside like, you fucking idiot. Oh, my book isn't out. I just realized that. It's not a superstructure, you're big. It's not a superstructure, Lovecraft. It's a fucking pyramid, okay? Stop calling it weird things. Stop calling it a bunch of dumb words that you're making up that aren't what it is. Corpse nerds. Get stacked, dorks. Uh, oh crap. There's no like there's no like breaks in the paragraphs. It's all run on, so I don't know where I am. Borders are entirely of brick. In either case, it would have been appropriate, for the unexpected tenacity of the easy-looking brickwork was surely a sardonic commentary on the vanity of mortal hopes, and the source of a task whose performance deserved every possible stimulus. Dusk fell, and found Birch still toiling. He worked largely by feeling now. Since newly gathered clouds hid the moon, and though progress was still slow, he felt heartened at the extent of his encroachments on top and bottom of the aperture. He could, he was sure, get out by midnight, though it is characteristic of him that his thought was untinged with eerie implications, undisturbed by oppressive reflections on the time, the place, and the company beneath his feet. He philosophically chipped away at the stony brickwork, cursing when a fragment hit him in the face, and laughing when one struck the increasingly excited horse that pawed near the cypress tree. This man's a dork. This man's a super dork. I'm just imagining like chipping it away at it, and it just like bonks him right in the nose, and like ah. Also, how do you philosophically chip away at something other than when you're in your community college philosophy class? Haha, fuck you, horse. The guy, apparently. Chipping out a piece of brick and it hits the horse. He's like, get owned. 360, no chisel. Ponderously. Let's see. Philosophically chipped away at the stony bed, laughed at the horse. In time, the hole grew so large that he ventured to try his body in it now and then, shifting about so that the coffins beneath him rocked and creaked. He would not, he found, have to pile another on his platform to make the proper height, for the hole was on exactly the right level to use as soon as its size might permit. It must have been midnight at least when Birch decided he could get through the transom. Tired and perspiring, despite many rests, he descended to the floor and sat a while on the bottom box to gather strength for the final wiggle and leap to the ground outside. The hungry horse was neighing repeatedly and almost uncannily, as he vaguely wished it to stop. He was curiously unelated over his impending escape, and almost dreaded the exertion, for his form had the indolent stoutness of early middle age. He's got a dad bod, that's what he's got. Sweaty nerd. You sweaty dad bod ass nerd. As he recounted the splitting coffins, he felt his weight very poignantly, especially when upon reaching the topmost one, he heard the aggravated crackle which bespeaks the wholesale rending of wood. He had, it seemed, planned in vain when choosing the stoutest coffin for the platform, for no sooner was his full bulk upon it that the rotting lid gave way, jouncing him 2 feet down on a surface which he did not care to imagine. Maddened by the sound or by the stench which billowed forth even to the open air, the waiting horse gave a scream that was too frantic for a neigh, and plunged madly off through the night, the wagon rattling crazily behind it. The horse was like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to be involved. Look, you're breaking into coffins in there. Look, I'm not going to be here when the cops show up, okay? This is a you problem. Birch, in his ghastly situation, was now too low for an easy scramble out of the enlarged transom, but gathered his energies for a determined try. He's going to give it that good old college try. Clutching the edges of the aperture, he sought to pull himself up when he noticed this is going to be weird, because I know that this doesn't mean what it means now, but but it's a sentence for sure. When he noticed a queer retardation in the form of an apparent drag on both his ankles. I think that could be translated as like a strange occurrence or like a strange like alteration from the norm. In the form of an apparent drag on both his ankles. In another moment, he knew fear for the first time that night, for struggle as he would, he could not shake clear of the unknown grasp which held his feet in relentless captivity. Horrible pains, as of savage wounds, shot through his calves, and in his mind was a vortex of fright, mixed with an unquenchable materialism that suggested splinters, loose nails, or some other attribute of breaking wooden box. Perhaps he screamed. At any rate, he kicked and squirmed frantically and automatically, whilst his consciousness was almost eclipsed in a half swoon. Get out of here, Horace. Go be in a better story. A strange slowing. Yeah, like to retard something is to slow. Like whenever you hear the term flame retardant, it would be like to slow the fire. Here we go. Instinct guided him in his wriggle through the transom, and in the crawl which followed his jarring thud on the damp ground, he could not walk, it appeared, and the emerging moon must have witnessed a horrible sight as he dragged his bleeding ankles towards the cemetery. Wait a minute. I think I'm at the wrong. Wait a minute. Wait. Horrible pains, savage wounds, mixed with thing. Did he get out? At any rate, he quicked and swarmed frantically and automatically, whilst his consciousness was almost. Okay, whatever. Instinct guided him in his wriggle through the transom, and in the crawl which followed his jarring thud into the damp ground, he could not walk, it appeared, and the emerging moon must have witnessed a horrible sight as he was dragging his bleeding ankles towards the cemetery lodge, his fingers clawing the black mold in brainless haste, and his body responding with that maddening slowness which one suffers when chased by the phantoms of a nightmare. There was evidently, however, no pursuer, for he was alone and alive when Armington, the lodge-keeper, answered his feeble clawing at the door. Armington helped Birch to the outside of a spare bed, and sent his little son Edwin for Dr. Davis. The afflicted man was fully conscious, but would say nothing of any consequence, merely muttering such things as, "Oh, my ankles! Let go!" Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. We're going. I gotta do something. I gotta do something. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Can I just get like one? Hold on. Wait. Wait. Whoopsie. Nope. Stop that. Hold on. I want to try and do something real quick. Hold on. No. Stop that. This makes me laugh every time. Hold on. Cancel that. Hold on. Okay, I have my book out. Hold on. The afflicted man was fully conscious, but would say nothing of consequence, merely muttering such things as all you could say is my leg. Okay. Okay, let's take that one last time. The afflicted man was fully conscious, but would say nothing of any consequence, merely muttering such things as, "Oh, my ankles, let go," or "Shut in the tomb," or "My leg." The doctor came with such a then the doctor came with his medicine case and asked crisp questions and removed the patient's outer clothing, shoes, and socks. The wounds for both ankles were frightfully lacerated about the Achilles tendons. Seemed it seemed to puzzle the old physician greatly, and finally almost frighten him. His questioning grew more than medically tense, as his hands shook and he dressed the mangled members, binding them as if he wished to get the wounds out of sight as quickly as possible. For an impersonal doctor, Davis's ominous and awestruck cross-examination became very strange indeed, as he sought to drain from the weakened undertaker every last detail of his horrible experience. He was oddly anxious to know if Birch were sure, absolutely sure, of the identity of that top coffin in the pile, how he had chosen it, how he was certain of it that it was the Fenner coffin in the dusk, and how he had distinguished it from the inferior duplicate coffin of the vicious Asaph Sawyer. Would the firm Fenner casket have caved in so readily? Davis, an old-time village practitioner, had of course seen both the respective funerals, as indeed he had attended both Fenner and Sawyer in their last illness. He had even wondered, at Sawyer's funeral, how the vindictive farmer had managed to lie straight in a box so closely akin to that of the diminutive Fenner. After a full 2 hours, Dr. Davis left, urging Birch to insist at all times that his wounds were caused entirely by loose nails and splintering wood. What else, he added, could ever in any case be proved or believed? But it would be well to say as little as could be said, and to let no other doctor treat the wounds. Birch heeded his advice all the rest of his life till he told me this story, and when I saw the scars, ancient and whitened as they were, I agreed that he was wise in so doing. He always remained lame. He remained lame. He was he was lame. Ugh. He's so lame. He could have been 2008, but he's just 2000 late. I tried. For the great tendons had been severed, but I think the greatest lameness the greatest lameness was in his soul. What a what a lame soul this man has. What a lame ass soul. His thinking process, once so phlegmatic and logical, had become ineffaceably scarred, and it was pitiful to note his response to certain chance allusions such as Friday, tomb, coffin, and words of less obvious concat, concatenation. His frightened horse had gone home, but his frightened wits never quite did after that. He changed his business, but something always preyed upon him. It may have just been the fear, and it may have been a fear mixed with a queer, belated sort of remorse for bygone crudities. His drinking, of course, only aggravated what it was meant to alleviate. When Dr. Davis left Birch that night, he had taken a lantern and gone to the old receiving tomb. The moon was shining on the scattered brick fragments and marred facade, and the latch of the great door yielded readily to a touch from the outside. Steeled by old ordeals in dissecting rooms, the doctor entered and looked about, stifling the nausea of mind and body that everything in sight and smell induced. He cried aloud once, and a little later gave a gasp that was more than a terrible cry. That was more terrible than a cry. Then he fled back to the lodge and broke all the rules of his calling by rousing and shaking his patient and hurling at him a succession of shuddering whispers that scared into bewildered ears like the hissing of vitriol. It was Asaph's coffin, Birch, just as I thought. I knew his teeth, with the front ones missing on the upper jaw. Never, for God's sake, shoe those wounds. The body was pretty badly gone, but if I ever saw vindictiveness on any face or former face, you know that a fiend he was. What a fiend he was for revenge. How he ruined old Raymond's 30 years after their boundary suit, and how he stepped on the puppy and snapped. Oh my god. Stepped. This guy literally kicked a puppy. this guy's a literal puppy kicker. How old Raymond stepped on the puppy that snapped at him years ago, late August. He was the devil incarnate, Birch, and I believe his eye for an eye fury could beat old Father Death himself. God, what a rage! I'd hate to have it aimed at me. Why did you do it, Birch? He was a scoundrel, and I don't blame you for giving him a cast-aside coffin, but you always did go too damn far. Well, enough to skimp on the thing in some way, but you knew what little man old Fenner was. I'll never get the picture out of my head as long as I live. You kicked hard, for Asaph's coffin was on the floor. His head was broken in, and everything was tumbled about. I've seen sights before, but there was one thing too much here. An eye for an eye. Great heavens, Birch. But you got what you deserved. The skull turned in my stomach. But the other was worse. Those ankles cut neatly off to fit Matt Fenner's cast-aside coffin. And that was the vault. So to translate all that, this Goobus got trapped in a vault, got trapped in the tomb. He tried to stack a bunch of coffins to get out of the tomb through like a hole on top of the door, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna use my super sick ass, super awesome coffin that I made at the top of the stack because that'll support my weight and it's super cool and great." But he also made like another coffin before that that was sort of like his demo version that was like he made this one and it was like, this one's shit, I'm not going to use it for this guy. So he used it for like the town shithead, and the punchline of the story is that in order to fit him in that coffin, he had to cut off the ankles of the town shithead after he died. So town shithead was like, well then fuck you, I'm taking your ankles. Your ankles are mine. Give me your ankles. Chat. Chat, hold on. Chat. Chat, give me your ankles. Give me your ankles. Give them to me. Give me your ankles. I need to I need to re-small myself. Hold on. I gotta shrink back down. Beep. Wait, too small. There we go. You lose your leg privileges. I've got your legs. Now I've got your power. Hold on. Me when I get your legs.
Now I've got your power.
Me when I get your fucking legs. Me when I get your legs. Alright. Alright, let me float back up to my chair. Lovecraft is so dry, so I'm gonna take like every opportunity to fucking goof off. Alright, so the next story on the list is Pickman's model. Let me grab a drink of water. Alright, let's do it. You needn't think I'm crazy, Elliot. Plenty of others have queerer prejudices than this. Why don't you laugh at Oliver's grandfather who won't ride in a motor? If I don't like that damned subway, it's my own business. And we got here more quickly anyhow in the taxi. We'd have had to walk up the hill from the Park Street if we'd taken the car. I know I'm more nervous than I was when you saw me last year, but you don't but you don't need to hold a clinic over it. don't hold a clinic over it, bro. Don't have a cow. There's plenty of reason, God knows, and I fancy I'm lucky to be sane at all. Why the third degree? You didn't used to be so inquisitive. Well, if you must hear it, I don't know why you shouldn't. Maybe you ought to, anyhow, for you kept writing me like a grieved parent when you heard I'd begun to cut the art club and keep away from Pickman. Now that he's disappeared, I go around to the club once in a while, but my nerves aren't what they were. No, I don't know what's become of Pickman, and I don't like to guess. You might have surmised that I had some inside information when I dropped him, and that's why I don't want to think where he's gone. Let the police find what they can. It won't be much, judging from the fact that they don't know yet of the old North End place he hired under the name of Peters. I'm not sure that I could find it again myself, not that I'd ever try, even in broad daylight. Yes, I do know, or am afraid to know, why he maintained it. I'm coming to that. And it, he's, he's coming to that. And I think you'll understand before I'm through why I don't tell the police. They would ask me to guide them, but I couldn't go back there even if I knew the way. There was something there, and now I can't use the subway or, and you may as well have your laugh at this too, go down into cellars anymore. I should think you'd have known I didn't drop Pickman for the same silly reasons that fussy old women like Dr. Reed or Joe Mignot or Bosworth did. Morbid art doesn't shock me, and when a man has the genius Pickman had, I feel it an honor to know him, no matter what direction his work takes. This guy's just absolutely, he's like, oh, that Pickman, how I hate him, but I'm also going to dick ride him. Dunk that boy. Da, 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 da. Hold on, I lost my place again. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. No matter what direction his artwork takes, Boston never had a greater painter than Richard Upton Pickman. Richard Upton gonna give it to you. Upton Pickman gonna give it to you. Upton Funk. Upton Funk gonna give it to you. I said it at first, and I say it still, and I never swerved an inch either. When he shewed that ghoul feeding, that you remember when Minot cut him with fuck. I said it at first, and I say it still, and I never swerved an inch either when he showed that quote unquote ghoul feeding that you remember when Minot cut him. You know, it takes profound art and profound insight into nature to turn out stuff like Pickman's. Any magazine cover hack can splash paint around wildly and call it a nightmare, or a witch's Sabbath, or a portrait of the devil, but only a great painter can make such a thing really scare or ring true. That's because only a real artist knows the actual anatomy of the terrible or the physiology of fear, the exact sort of lines and proportions that connect up with the latent instincts or hereditary memories of fright, and the proper color contrasts and lighting effects to stir the dormant sense of strangeness. I don't have to tell you why a Fusili really brings a shiver while a cheap ghost story frontispiece merely makes us laugh. There's something those fellows catch beyond life that they're able to make us catch for a second. Dore had it, Syme has it, and Gora of Chicago has it, and Pickman had it, as no man ever had it before. I hope to heaven or ever will again. Don't ask me what it is they see, you know. In ordinary art, there's all the difference in the world between the vital, breathtaking things drawn from nature or models of the artificial truck that commercial. Fuck. Damn it. I can't read. You know, in ordinary art, there's all the difference in the world between the vital, breathtaking things drawn from nature or models and the artificial truck that commercial small fry reel off the bare studio by rule. Well, I should say that the really weird artist has a kind of vision which makes models or summons up what amounts to actual scenes from the spectral world he lives in. Anyhow, he manages to turn out results that differ from the pretender's mince pie dreams in just about the same way that the life painter's results differ from the concoctions of a correspondence school cartoonist. If I had ever seen what Pickman saw, but no. Here, let's have a drink before we get any deeper. Gad, I wouldn't be alive if I ever seen what that man, if he was a man, saw. This is such a word salad. I just read, like, what, 2 or 3 paragraphs, and I feel like he said nothing. Pickman, how can he disparage these cute little plant guys? Why? Why would he do this? Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Whenever I say Pickman in this story, I want you to imagine that it's one of these guys. This is this is Pickman. This is what the painter looks like. This is who they are. Everyone everyone just keep that in mind. He's painting with corpses and blood because he's pulling them open to figure out how they look. Oh wait, that might have been you actually like being real. I thought we were still talking about the Pikmin. The little Pikmin is tearing open bodies. Imagining Olimar just like throwing out Pikmin on top of a dead body. Tear it open. Ugh. Crap. I looked away from the book for too long. Um, uh, you recall that Pikmin's forte was faces. I don't believe anybody since Goya could put so much sheer hell into a set of features or a twist of expression. And before Goya, you have to go back to the medieval chaps who did the gargoyles and chimeras on Notre Dame and Mont Saint Michel. They believed all sorts of things, and maybe they saw all sorts of things too, for the Middle Ages had some curious phases. I remember your asking Pickman yourself once, the year before you went away, wherever the thunder he got such ideas and visions. Wasn't that a nasty laugh he gave you? It was partly because of that laugh that Reed dropped him. Reed, you know, had just taken up comparative pathology and was full of pompous inside stuff about the biological evolutionary significance of this or that mental or physical symptom. He said Pickman repelled him more and more every day, and almost frightened him towards the last, that the fellow's features and expression were slowly developing in a way he didn't like, in a way that wasn't human. He had a lot of talk about diet, and I said Pickman must be abnormal and eccentric to the last degree. I suppose you told Reed, if you and he had any correspondence over it, that he'd let Pickman's paintings get on his nerves or harrow up on his imagination. I know I told him that myself then. But keep in mind that I didn't drop Pickman for anything like this. On the contrary, my admiration for him kept growing. For you know, ghoul feeding was a tremendous achievement. As you know, the club wouldn't exhibit it, and the Museum of Fine Arts wouldn't accept it as a gift. And I can add that nobody would buy it, so Pickman had it right in his house till he went. Now his father has it in Salem. You know Pickman comes of old Salem stock, and had a witch ancestor hanged in 1692. I like how they're basically like, yeah, he drew some fucked up shit, and then he was like, hey, club, do you want this? No. Art museum, do you want this for free? No. Does anyone want to buy this? No. Pickman was shit at commissions, confirmed. He made a very bad year character here, and nobody wanted it. I got into the habit of calling on Pickman quite often, especially after I began making notes for a monograph on weird art. Probably it was his work which put the idea into my head, and anyhow, I found him a mine of data and suggestions when I came to develop it. He showed me all of his paintings and drawings he had about, including some pen and ink sketches that would, I verily believe, have gotten him kicked out of the club if many of the members had seen them. Before long, I was pretty nearly a devotee, and would listen for hours like a schoolboy to art theories and philosophic speculations wild enough to qualify him for the Danvers Asylum. My hero worship, coupled with the fact that people generally were commencing to have less and less to do with him, made him get very confidential with me, and one evening he hinted that if I were fairly closed-mouthed and none too squeamish, he might show me something rather unusual, something a bit stronger than anything he had in his house. Do you think the narrator and Pickman ever explored each other's bodies? Do you think that they had that kind of relationship at some point, and we just don't want to talk about it? I want to believe they did. I think they could have truly loved each other. Is it possible for love to blossom on in a Lovecraft story? 40% chance. 40% chance of love. You know, he said, there are things that won't do for Newbury Street. Things that are out of place here, and that can't be conceived here, anyhow. It's my business to catch the overtones of the soul, and you won't find those in a parvenu set of artificial streets on made land. Back Bay isn't Boston. It isn't anything yet, because it's had no time to pick up memories and attract local spirits. If there were any ghosts here, They're the tame ghosts of Salt Marsh, excuse me, and a shallow cove. And I want human ghosts, the ghosts of beings highly organized enough to have looked on hell and known the meaning of what they saw. The place for an artist to live is in North End. If any aesthete were sincere, he'd put up with the slums for the sake of the mass traditions. God, man, don't you realize that places like that weren't merely made, but actually grew? Generation after generation lived and felt and died there. And in the days when people weren't afraid to live and feel and die, I'm. Yo, like and subscribe if you're not afraid to live, feel, and die. Smash that like button. Anyway, this is Twitch, not YouTube, so that doesn't make sense. Native American spirits come and whack him upside the head. Yeah, Lovecraft. I don't know if you know, but yeah, there's like a shit ton of Native American spirits who would absolutely like to just whap everybody upside the head with a rock. Ah, crap. Where was I? Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. It actually grew. Generation after generation lived and felt and died there. And in days when people weren't afraid to live, feel, and die. Don't you know there was a mill on Copp's Hill in 1632, and that half the present streets were laid out by 1650? I can show you the houses of those who had stood for 2 centuries and a half and more. Houses that have witnessed what would make a modern house crumble into powder. What do moderns know of life and the forces behind it? You call the Salem witchcraft a delusion, but I'll wager my 4 times great-grandmother could have told you things. They hanged her on Gallows Hill, with Cotton Mather looking sanctimoniously on. Mather, damn him, was afraid somebody might succeed in kicking free of his cursed cage of monotony. I wish someone had laid a spell on him or sucked his blood in the night. I can show you a house he lived in. I can show you another one he was afraid to enter, in spite of all his fine, bold talk. He knew things he didn't dare put into that stupid Magnalia, or in the puerile wonders of the invisible world. Look here, do you know the whole North End once had a set of tunnels that kept certain people in touch with each other's houses, and the burying ground and the sea? Let them prosecute and persecute above ground. Things went on every day that they couldn't reach, and voices laughed at night that they couldn't place. Why, man, out of 10 surviving houses built before 1700 and not moved since, I'll wager that in 8 I can show you something queer in the cellar. There's hardly a month that you don't read of workmen finding bricked up arches and wells leading nowhere in this or that old place as it comes down. You could see one near Henchman Street from the elevated last year. Okay, no, I heard that right. There were witches, and what their spells summoned, pirates, and what they brought in from the sea, smugglers and privateers, and I tell you, people knew how to live, and how to enlarge the bounds of life in the old times. This wasn't the oldie world a bold and wise man could know. Faugh! And to think of today in contrast, with such pale pink brains that even a club of supposed artists gets shudders and convulsions if a picture goes beyond the feelings of a Beacon Street tea table. This man, I'm imagining this guy in his little art club, and he's like, everyone else is drawing like flowers and stuff, and he's sitting there and he's drawing like the most like alt fetish like furry kink anyone could possibly draw. He's just going nuts with it. He's just going with the hyper macro, just doing everything at once. And everyone's like, my god, what is this? And he's just like, this is my persona, you bastard. Ow. I just banged my foot on the table. Ow. Ow. I hurt myself. I hurt my ankle. It was the guy from the first story. He bit me. He's drawing the same flowers, but just talking weird. That's even funnier, actually. He's doing the exact same thing, but he's just being really weird about it. Ugh. The only saving grace of the present is that it's too damn stupid to question the past very closely. What do maps and records and guidebooks really tell of the North End? Bah! At a guess, I'll guarantee to lead you to 30 or 40 alleys of the network of alleys north of Prince Street that aren't suspected by 10 living beings outside of the foreigners that swarm them. And what do those Dagos? 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 Dagoes? Dagos? And what do those Dagos know of their meaning? No, Thurber. These ancient places are dreaming and gorgeously overflowing with wonder and terror, and escapes from the commonplace, yet there's not a living soul to understand or profit by them. Or rather, there's one living soul, for I haven't been digging around in the past for nothing. Dago is a slur? Wait, really? Oh dear, I'm sorry. If Dago is a oh no. Do I want to know what that means? Wait a minute. Uh, oh, offensive slang used as a disparaging term for a person of Italian, Spanish, or Portuguese descent. That's fucked up. You're an asshole, Lovecraft. You're an asshole, Lovecraft. Damn, I've never heard that word before. I'm gonna have to, like, I don't know if I should forget that word so it doesn't live on, or if I should keep it in mind. Oh, it's old. Okay. Well, thankfully, I don't think anyone's gonna be real chomping at the bit to say that now. See here, you're interested in this sort of thing. What if I told you I've got another studio up there, where I can catch the night spirit of antique horror and paint things that I couldn't even think of in Newbury Street? Naturally, I don't tell those cursed old maids at the club, with Reed, damn him, whispering, as it is that I'm sort of that I'm the sort of monster bound down the toboggan of reverse evolution. What the fuck did you just say? What did you just say, old man? Naturally, I don't tell those cursed old maids at the club, with Reed, damn him, whispering even as it is that I'm a sort of monster bound down the toboggan of reverse evolution. Has anyone gone as far as decided to want look do more look like? How does hot food take out oven eat the cold if you oven out hot eat the food cold? I've got a place that I don't believe 3 living Nordic men besides myself have ever seen. It isn't so very far from the elevated as distance goes, but it's centuries away as the soul goes. I took it because of the queer old brick well in the cellar. One of the sort I told you about. The shack's almost tumbling down so that nobody else would live there, and I'd hate to tell you how little I pay for it. The windows are all boarded up, but I like that all the better, since I don't want daylight for what I do. I paint in the cellar, where the inspiration is thickest, but I've other rooms furnished on the grounds floor. A Sicilian owns it, and I've hired it under the name of Peters. Now, if you're game, I'll take you there tonight. I think you'd enjoy the pictures, for as I said, I've let myself go a bit there. It's no vast tour. I sometimes do it on foot, for I don't want to attract attention with a taxi in such a place. We can take the shuttle at the South Station for Battery Street, and after that the walk isn't much. He's saying people say he's a loony. People think I'm a fucking nut. All I'm doing is drawing flowers with blood, or I'm drawing zombies chomping on the wiener. Everyone thinks I'm a crazy guy. I draw my persona at art club one time, and everyone thinks I'm a weirdo. Well, I think we're now switching perspectives. We were with Pickman for a little while there. I think now we're back to the pro tag. Well, Elliot, there wasn't much for me to do after that after that harangue, harangue, but to keep myself from running instead of walking for the first vacant cab we could sight. We changed to the elevated at the South Station, and at about 12 o'clock we had climbed down the steps at Battery Street and struck along the old waterfront past Constitution Wharf. I didn't keep track of the cross streets, and can't tell you yet which it was we turned up. But I know it wasn't Greenall Lane. When we did turn, it was to climb through the deserted length of the oldest and dirtiest alley I'd ever saw in my life, with crumbling looking gables, broken and small paned windows, and an archaic chimneys that stood out, half disintegrated against the moonlit sky. I don't believe there were 3 houses in sight that hadn't been standing in Cotton Mather's time. Certainly I glimpsed at least 2 with an overhang, and once I thought I saw a peaked roof line, the almost forgotten pre-gambrel type, though antiquarians tell us there are none left in Boston. Buddy, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. just imagining this guy like talking to someone in the cab, there's another guy sharing the cab, and he's just going like, uh-huh, okay, cool. From that alley, which had a dim light, we turned to the left into an equally silent and still narrower alley with no light at all, and in a minute made what I think was an obtuse angled bend towards the right in the dark. Not long after this, Pickman produced a flashlight and revealed an antediluvian 10-paneled door that looked damnably worm-eaten. Unlocking it, he ushered me into a barren hallway with what was damn it, with what was once splendid dark oak paneling. Dark oak paneling, dark oak paneling. Simple, of course, but thrillingly suggestive of the times of Andros and Phipps and the witchcraft. Then he took me through the door on the left, lighted an oil lamp, and told me to make myself at home. Now, Elliot, I'm what the man in the street would call fairly hard-boiled, but I'll confess that what I saw on the walls of that room gave me a bad turn. They were his pictures, you know, the ones he couldn't paint or even show in Newbury Street. And he was right when he said he had let himself go. Here, have another drink. I need one anyhow. There's no use in trying to tell you what they were like, because the blasphemous horror, and the unbelievable loathsomeness and moral fautor came from simple touches quite beyond the power of words to classify. There were none of the exotic technique you see in Sydney Summay, none of the trans-Sautarian landscapes and lunar fungi that Clark Ashton Smith uses to freeze the blood. The backgrounds were mostly old churchyards, deep woods, cliffs by the sea, brick tunnels, ancient paneled rooms, or simple vaults of masonry. Copp's Hill burying ground, which could not be many blocks away from this very house, was a favorite scene. What an egg. What an egg this man is. What an egg. The madness and monstrosity lay in the figures in this foreground, for Pickman's morbid art was preeminently one of the demonic portraiture. These figures were seldom completely human, but often approached humanity in varying degree. Most of the bodies, while roughly bipedal, had a forward slumping and a vaguely canine cast. The texture of the majority was a kind of unpleasant rubberiness. Ugh, I can see them now. Their occupations, well, don't ask me to be too precise. They were usually feeding, I don't say on what. They were sometimes shown in groups in cemeteries or underground passages, and often appeared to be in battle over their prey, or rather their treasure trove. And what damnable expressiveness Pickman sometimes gave to the sightless faces of this charnel booty. Booty. He said booty. Charnel booty. Occasionally, the things were shown leaping through open windows at night, or squatting on the chests of sleepers, worrying at their throats. One canvas showed a ring of them baying about on a hanged witch of Gallows Hill, whose dead face held a close kinship to theirs. But don't get the idea that it was all in this hideous business of theme and setting which struck me as faint. I'm not a 3-year-old kid, and I'd seen much like this before. It was the faces, Elliot, those accursed faces, that leered and slavered out of the canvas, with the very breath of life. By God, man, I verily believe they were alive. That nauseous wizard had waked the fires of hell in pigment, and in his brush had been a nightmare-spawning wand. Give me that decanter, Elliot. It's very strange that this is written as if this guy is having a conversation with someone else, and I still want to believe that this Elliot guy he's talking to is just sitting there being like, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Uh, uh, can I like, can I get like a GIF? He's like just doing this. He's like, yeah, that's real nice, uh-huh, 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 okay, uh-huh. He's just, they're all just like, he's just standing there like, okay, that's cool. Oh, that's fascinating. Pixit nails. Wow, that's really nice. So cool. All right. Da, 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 da. There was one thing called the lesson, heaven pity me, that I ever saw it. Listen, can you fancy a squatting circle of nameless dog-like things in a churchyard teaching a small child how to feed like themselves? The price of a changeling, I suppose. You know the old myth about how the weird people leave their spawn in cradles in exchange for the human babes they steal. Pickman was showing what happens to those stolen babes, how they grow up, and I then began to see a hideous relationship in the faces of the human and non-human figures. He was, in all his gradations of morbidity, between the frankly non-human and the degradedly human, establishing a sardonic linkage in evolution. The dog things were developed from mortals, and no sooner that I wondered what he had made of their own young as left with mankind in the form of changelings, than my eye caught a picture embodying that very thought. It was that of an ancient Puritan interior, a heavily beamed room with lattice windows, a settle, a clumsy 17th century furniture, and the family sitting about while the father read from the scriptures. Every face but one showed nobility and reverence, but one reflected the mockery of the pit. It was that of a young man in years, and no doubt belonged to a supposed son of that pious father, but in essence it was the kin of those unclean things. It was their changeling, and in a spirit of supreme irony, Pickman had given it the features of a very perceptible resemblance to his own. By this time, Pickman had lighted a lamp in an adjoining room, and was politely holding open the door for me, asking me if I would care to see his modern studies. I hadn't been able to give him much of my opinions. I was too speechless with fright and loathing, but I think he fully understood, and felt highly complimented. And now I want to assure you again, Elliot, that I am no mollycoddle. I'm no chat. I am no mollycoddle. If any of you call me a mollycoddle, you're banned for life. Nobody calls me a mollycoddle. I'm no mollycoddle to scream at anything which shows a bit of departure from the usual. I'm middle-aged and decently sophisticated, and I guess you saw enough of me in France to know I'm not easily knocked out. Yeah, you're a polycoddle. I will accept that. Because I want to coddle with a poly amount of people. Mm. I bumped my mic. Hold on. Mm. Ba, 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 ba. Lost my place, but I just have to look for the word mollycoddle. I guess you saw enough of me in France to know I am not easily knocked out. Remember, too, that I just about recovered my wind and gotten used to those frightful pictures which turned colonial New England into a kind of annex of hell. Well, in spite of all this, the next room forced a real scream out of me, and I had to clutch at the doorway to keep from keeling over. The other chamber had shown a pack of ghouls and witches overrunning the world of our forefathers, but this one brought the horror right into our own daily life. Gad, how the man could paint! There was a study called Subway Accident, in which a flock of the vile things were clambering up from some unknown catacomb through a crack in the floor of the Bostilian Street subway and attacking a crowd of people on the platform. Another showed a dance on Copp's Hill among the tombs with the background of today. Then there were any number of cellar views, with monsters creeping in through holes and rifts in the masonry, and grinning as if they squatted behind barrels or furnaces and waited for their first victim to descend the stairs. One disgusting canvas seemed to depict a vast cross-section of Beacon Hill, with ant-like armies of the mephitic monsters squeezing themselves through burrows that honeycombed the ground. Dances in modern cemeteries were freely pictured, and another conception somehow shocked me more than the rest, a scene in an unknown vault, where scores of the beast crowded about one who held a well-known Boston guidebook and was evidently reading aloud. All were pointing to a certain passage, and every face seemed so distorted with epileptic and reverberant laughter that I almost thought I had heard the fiendish echoes. The title of the picture was Holmes, Lowell, and Longfellow Lie Buried in Mount Auburn. As I gradually steadied myself and got readjusted to his second room of deviltry and morbidity, I began to analyze some of the points in my sickening loathing. In the first place, I said to myself, these things repelled because of the utter inhumanity and callous cruelty they showed in Pickman. The fellow must be a relentless enemy of all mankind to take such glee in the torture of brain and flesh, and the degradation of the mortal tenement. In the second place, they terrified because of their very greatness. Their art was the art that convinced. When we saw the pictures, we saw the demons themselves and were afraid of them. And the queer part was that Pickman got none of his power from the use of selectiveness or bizarrerie. Nothing was blurred, distorted, or conventionalized. Outlines were sharp and lifelike, and details were almost painfully defined, and the faces. It was not any mere artist's interpretation of what we saw, it was pandemonium itself, crystal clear and stark objectivity. That was it, by heaven. The man was not a fantasticee or a romanticist at all. He did not even try to give us the churning prismatic ephemera of dreams, but coldly and sardonically reflected some stable, mechanistic, and well-established horror world which he saw fully, brilliantly, squarely, and unfalteringly. God knows what world can have been, or where he ever glimpsed the blasphemous shapes that loped and trotted and sprawled through it. But whatever the baffling source of his images, one thing was plain. Pickman was in every sense, in conception and in execution, a thorough, painstaking, and almost scientific realist. My host was now leading the way down the cellar to his actual studio, and I braced myself for some hellish effects among the unfinished canvases. As we reached the bottom of the damp stairs, he turned his flashlight to a corner of the large open space at hand, revealing the circular brick curb of what was evidently a great well in the earthen floor. We walked nearer, and I saw that it must be 5 feet across, with walls good foot thick and some 6 inches above the ground level. Solid work of the 17th century, or I was much mistaken. That, Pickman said, was the kind of thing he'd been talking about, an aperture of the network of tunnels that used to undermine the hill. I noticed idly that it did not seem to be bricked up, and that heavy disk of wood formed the apparent cover. Thinking of the things this well must have been connected with if Pickman's wild hints had not been mere rhetoric, I shivered slightly, then turned to follow him up a step and through a narrow door into a room of fair size, provided with a wooden floor and furnished as a studio. An acetylene gas outfit gave the light necessary to work. The unfinished pictures on easels or propped against the walls were as ghastly as the finished ones upstairs, and showed the painstaking methods of the artist. Scenes were blocked out with extreme care, and penciled guidelines told of the minute exactitude which Pickman used in getting the right perspective and proportions. The man was great, I say it even now, knowing as much as I do. A large camera on the table excited my notice, and Pickman told me that he used it in taking scenes for backgrounds, so that he might paint them from photographs in the studio, instead of carting his outfit around the town for this or that view. He thought that a photograph quite as good as an actual scene or model for sustained work, and declared he employed them regularly. There was something very disturbing about the nauseous sketches and half-finished monstrosities that leered around from every side of the room. And when Pickman suddenly unveiled a huge canvas on the side away from the light, I could not for my life keep back a loud scream, the second I had emitted that night. It echoed and echoed through the dim vaultings of that ancient and nitrous cellar, and I had to choke back a flood of reaction that threatened to burst out his hysterical laughter. Merciful Creator, Elliot! But I don't know how much was real and how much was feverish fancy. It doesn't seem to me that Earth can hold such a dream like that. It was a colossal and nameless blasphemy with glaring red eyes, and it held in its bony claws a thing that had been a man, gnawing at the head as a child nibbles at a stick of candy. Its position was in a kind of a crouch, and as one looked, one felt that at any moment it might drop its present prey and seek a juicier morsel. But damn it all, it wasn't even the fiendish subject that made it such an immortal fountainhead of all panic. Not that, nor the dog face with its pointed ears and bloodshot eyes and flat nose and drooling lips. It wasn't the scaly claws, nor the mold-caked body, nor the half-hooved feet. None of these, though any one of them may as well driven an excitable man to madness. It was his gigantic, fat cock, Elliot. It was his big, fat penis. It was his big wing-wang. It was the giant, throbbing meat chop that just flopped around between the legs. It was his persona, Elliot, with an enormously grotesque penis. I wish it was that. Just imagine him trying to describe, trying to describe in like 50 words of fucking dick. Great and knotted as it was. His third leg that would take a full body's worth of blood to erectile into proper working condition. It was the technique, Elliot. The cursed, the impious, the unnatural technique. As I am a living being, I never elsewhere saw the actual breath of life so fused into a canvas. The monster was there. It glared and gnawed and gnawed and gnarled. And it burped into the mic. I'm sorry. And I knew that only a suspension of nature's laws could ever let a man paint a... I'm choking on myself. Ugh. And I knew that only a suspension of nature's laws could ever let a man paint a thing like that without a model, without some glimpse of the netherworld which no mortal unsouled to the fiend has ever had. Pinned with a thumbtack to a vacant part of the canvas was a piece of paper now badly curled up, probably, I thought, a photograph, from which Pickman meant to paint a background as hideous as the nightmare it was to enhance. I reached out to uncurl and look at it, when I suddenly saw Pickman start as if shot. He had been listening with peculiar intensity ever since my shocked scream had walked unaccustomed echoes into the dark cellar, and now he seemed struck with a fright which, though not comparable to my own, had in it more of a physical than sort of a spiritual. He drew a revolver and motioned to me in silence, then stepped out into the main cellar and closed the door behind him. He pulled a gat on me. He pulled out a piece, and he said, "I'm going to pop a cap in you." I think I was paralyzed for an instant. Imitating Pickman's listening, I fancied I heard a faint scurrying sound somewhere, and a series of squeals or bleats in a direction I couldn't determine. I thought of huge rats and shuddered. Then there came a subdued sort of clatter, which somehow set me all in gooseflesh, a furtive, groping kind of clatter, though I can't attempt to convey what I mean in words. It was like a heavy wood falling on stone or brick, wood on brick. What did that make me think of? It came again and louder. There was a vibration as if the wood had fallen farther than it had fallen before. After that followed a sharp grating noise, a shouted gibberish from Pickman, and the deafening discharge of all 6 chambers of the revolver, fired spectacularly as a lion tamer might fire in the air for effect. A muffled squeal or squawk, and a thud. Then more wood and brick grating. A pause, and the opening of the door, at which, I'll confess, I stared violently. Pickman reappeared with his smoking weapon, cursing the bloated rats that infested the ancient well. "The deuce knows what they eat, there," he grinned. For those archaic tunnels touched graveyard and witch den and seacoast. But whatever it is, they must have run short, for they were devilishly anxious to get out. Your yelling stirred them up, I fancy. Better be cautious in these old places. Our rodent friends are the one drawback, though I sometimes think they're a positive asset by way of atmosphere and color. Well, Elliot, that was the end of the night's adventure. Pickman had promised to show me the place, and heaven knows he had done it. He led me out of the tangle of alleys in another direction, it seems, for when we sighted a lamppost, we were in a half-familiar street with the monotonous rows of mingled tenement blocks and old houses. Charter Street it turned out to be, but I was too flustered to notice just where we hit it. We were too late for the elevated, and walked back downtown through Hanover Street. I remember that walk. We switched from Tremont up Beacon, and Pickman left me at the corner of Joy, where I turned off. I never spoke to him again. Why did I drop him? Don't be impatient. Wait till I ring for coffee. We'd had enough of the other stuff, but I, for one, need something. No, it wasn't the paintings I saw in that place, though I'll swear they were enough to get him ostracized in the 9/10 of the homes and clubs of Boston. And I guess you wouldn't wonder now why I have to steer clear of subways and cellars. It was something I found in my coat the next morning. You know, the curled-up paper tacked to that frightful canvas in the cellar, the thing I thought was a photograph of some scene he meant to be a background for that monster. That last scare had come while I was reaching to uncurl it, and it seems I had vacantly crumpled it into my pocket. But here's the coffee. Take it black, Elliot, if you're wise. Yes, that paper was the reason I dropped Pickman. Richard Upton Pickman, the greatest artist I have ever known, and the foulest being that ever leaped the bounds of life into the pits of myth and madness. Elliot, old Reed was right. He wasn't strictly human. Either he was born in strange shadow, or he'd found a way to unlock the forbidden gate. It's all the time now, for he's gone, back into the fabulous darkness he loved to haunt. Here, let's have a chandelier going. let's all just have a chandelier right now. Let's go get a chandelier. Don't ask me to explain or even conjecture about what I burned. Don't ask me either what lay behind that mole-like scrambling Pickman was so keen to pass off as rats. There are secrets, you know, which might have come down to from the old Salem times, and Cotton Mather tells even stranger things. You know how damned lifelike Pickman's paintings were, how we all wondered where he got those faces. Well, the paper wasn't a photograph of any background, after all. What it showed was simply the monstrous being he was painting on that awful canvas. It was the model he was using, and its background was merely the wall of the cellar of the studio in minute detail. But by God, Elliot, it was a photograph from life. So this guy took a picture. So this guy, this guy got into his fursuit and then took a picture of it. And he was like, now I'm going to paint it. He was like, now I'm going to paint my fursuit. That's going to be really cool. It's going to be good art. Whew. Okay. I'm going to put a bookmark in there real quick. This dude was painting ghouls. This dude was painting ghouls and may have been one himself. So the way I kind of interpret it is, I kind of think that the bit was that he was painting stuff that had come out of the well. I think that well has the monsters that come out of it, and he had taken photographs of it, and that's what he's painting from. That's the things that he's painting, is following these things after they leave the well at night. That's my interpretation. You're correct. The other interpretation is that perhaps he came from that well himself as well. I mean, because Lovecraft stories can be a little bit up to interpretation in that kind of way. But that's the way I like to look at it. I'm going to go grab a snack and some more water. I'm going to take us to BRB for a little bit. I will be right back. I'm going to kick... let's see if I can... There we go. Let's turn that down. I'm going to kick the Donkey Kong music back on for the break. And I will be right back. And we'll do... What's the next one? The next one is Rats in the Walls. That one I'm going to have to censor a little bit. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, sorry that was so loud. I forgot the volume was fucking boosted. Silence, Donkey Kong. Okay. So where were we? Boop. And we're back. Grabs the ape. Ape stolen. Oh no, my apes. Oh no, my apes. Did y'all hear about the what was it? What was his name? Seth Green spent like a shit ton of money on like a monkey NFT, and then like he was gonna use it in a show, and then someone stole the ape, and then he had to pay like an exorbitant amount of money to get this JPEG of a monkey back. Oh, cryptocurrency is failing. Like this post to make it fail faster. By the way, it looking outside, it's starting to get kind of like real windy and like dark skies over here, which is very apt for thematically for today. But if the stream suddenly dies, or like I don't know, power goes out, or my internet dies or something, you'll know why. It'll be because the monsoons are starting to show up in southern Arizona. All right, let me get back. Let me zoom back up on my chair. That's the book. Ape has pirated ape. The ape has escaped. All right. So, next story is Rats in the Walls, and some of you might know that this is the one that has like the infamously like, oh god, why did you name the cat that? I'm going to name the cat Batman. In the context of this story, I will not say what the cat's name actually is, but I will call the cat Batman. And that's about all we need to do. On July 16th, 1923, I moved into Exham Priory after the last workman had finished his labors. The restoration had been a stupendous task, for little had remained of the deserted pile but a shell-like ruin. Yet because it had been the seat of my ancestors, I let no expense deter me. The place had not been inhabited since the reign of James I, when a tragedy of intensely hideous, though largely unexplained nature, had struck down the master, 5 of his children, and several servants, and driven forth under a cloud of suspicion and terror the 3rd son, my lineal progenitor, and the only survival of the abhorred line. With his sole heir denounced as a murderer, the estate had reverted to the crown, nor had the accused man made any attempt to exculpate himself or regain his property. Shaken by some horror greater than that of conscience or law, and expressing only a frantic wish to exclude the ancient edifice from his sight and memory, Walter de la Poer, 11th Baron Exham, fled to Virginia, and there founded the family which by the next century had become known as the Delapoer. Exham Priory had remained untenanted. Oh, okay, so like a tenant of an apartment. Untenanted. Untenanted. Sorry, it's a weird word. I've never had to say that out loud. Though later allotted to the estates of the Norris family, and much studied because of its peculiarly composite architecture, and architecture involving Gothic towers resting on a Saxon or Romanesque substructure, whose foundation in turn was of a still earlier order or blend of orders, Roman and even Druidic or native Cymric, if legends speak truly. This foundation was a very singular thing, being merged on one side with the solid limestone of the precipice from whose brink the priory overlooked, a desolate valley 3 miles west of the village of Anchester. Architects and the antiquarians loved to examine this strange relic of forgotten centuries, but the country folk hated it. They were like, "Damn, that shit's ugly. Get that shit out of here. Get that fantasy castle shit out of here. Get your vampire house out of here." They had hated it hundreds of years before, when my ancestors lived there, and they hated it now, with the moss and mold of abandonment on it. I had not been a day in Anchester before I knew I had came of an accursed house, and this weak workmen have blown up Exham Priory and are busy obliterating the traces of its foundations. The bare statistics of my ancestry I had always known, together with the fact that my first American forebear had come to the colonies under a strange cloud. Of details, however, I had been kept wholly ignorant through the policy of reticence always maintained by the Delapores. Unlike our planter neighbors, we seldom boasted of crusading ancestors or other medieval or Renaissance heroes, nor was any kind of tradition handed down except what may have been recorded in the sealed envelope left before the Civil War by every squire to his eldest son for the posthumous opening. The glories we cherished were those achieved since the migration, the glories of proud and honorable the glories of a proud and honorable, if somewhat reserved and unsocial Virginia line. During the war, our fortunes were extinguished and our whole existence changed by the burning of Carfax. Carfax, that's where you get your facts for cars. Carfax. This stream sponsored by Carfax. H.P. Lovecraft, sponsored by Carfax. Do you want your car shopping to be easier? Are you tired of Eldritch Abominations giving you low deals on your cars? Get with Carfax. Our home on the banks of the James. My grandfather, advanced in years, had perished in that incendiary outrage, and with him the envelope that bound us all to the past. I can recall that fire today as I saw it at the age of 7, with the Federal soldiers shouting, the women screaming, and I'm not saying that word out loud, howling and praying. My father was in the army defending Richmond, and after many formalities, my mother and I were passed through the lines to join him. When the war ended, we all moved north, whence my mother had come, and I grew to manhood, middle age, and ultimate wealth as a stolid Yankee. I suppose damage in my tires. So, like I said, there's going to be some words in this one that I think I'm going to be like mumbling over. My father nor I ever knew what our hereditary envelope had contained, and as I merged into the grayness of Massachusetts business life, I had lost all interest in the mysteries which evidently lurked far back in my family tree. Had I suspected their nature, how gladly I would have left Exham Priory to its moss, bats, and cobwebs. My father died in 1904, but without any message to leave to me, or to my only child, Alfred, a motherless boy of 10. It was this boy who reversed the order of family information, for although I could give him only jesting conjectures about the past, he wrote me of some very interesting ancestral legends when the late war took him to England in 1917. As an aviation officer, apparently the Delapores had a colorful and perhaps sinister history, for a friend of my son's, Captain Edward Norreys of the Royal Flying Corps, dwelt near the family seat at Anchester, and related some pleasant superstition with which few novelists could equal for wildness and incredibility. Norreys himself, of course, did not take them seriously, but they amused my son and made good material for his letters to me. It was this legendary which definitely turned my attention to my transatlantic heritage, and made me resolve to purchase and restore the family seat which Norreys showed to Alfred in its picturesque desertion, and offered to get for him at a surprisingly reasonable figure, since his own uncle was the present owner. I bought Exham Priory in 1918, but was almost immediately distracted from my plans of restoration by the return of my son as a maimed invalid. During the 2 years that I lived, I thought of nothing but his care, having even placed my businesses under the direction of partners. In 1921, I found myself bereaved and aimless, a retired manufacturer, no longer young. I resolved to divert my remaining years with my new possession. Visiting Anchester in December, I was entertained by Captain Norreys, a plump, admirable young man, who had thought much of my son, and secured his assistance in gathering plans and anecdotes to guide in the coming restoration. Exon Prior itself I saw without emotion, and jumble of tottering medieval ruins covered with legends and honeycombed with rooks' nests, perched perilously upon the precipice, perched perilously upon the precipice, perched perilously upon the precipice, perched perilously upon the precipice. Sorry, I saw an opportunity for like a say that 5 times fast. I'm like, I can't. Tongue twister. Perched perilously upon the precipice. Perched perilously upon the precipice. Perched perilously upon a precipice and denuded of floors or other interior features, save the stone walls of separate towers. As I gradually recovered the image of the edifice as it had been when my ancestors left it over 3 centuries before, I began to hire workmen for the reconstruction. In every case, I was forced to go outside the immediate locality, for the Manchester villagers had an almost unbelievable fear and hatred of the place. This sentiment was so great that it was sometimes communicated to the outside laborers, causing numerous distortions, whilst its scope appeared to include both the priory and its ancient family. My son had told me that he was a somewhat avoided during blah, 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 blah. My son had told me that he was somewhat avoided during his visits because he was a Delapore. I now found myself subtly ostracized for a like reason, until I convinced the peasants how little I knew of my heritage. Even then, they sullenly disliked me, so that I had to collect most of the village traditions through the mediation of Norries. What the people could not forgive, perhaps, was that I had come to restore a symbol so abhorrent to them. For rationally or not, they viewed Exon Priory as nothing less than a haunt of fiends and werewolves. Cool. That sounds rad. You people have no taste. Piecing together the tales which Norris collected for me, and supplementing them with the accounts of several savants who had studied the ruins, I deduced that Exon Priory stood on the site of a prehistoric temple, a druidical or ante-druidical thing, which must have been contemporary with Stonehenge. That indescribable rites had been celebrated here. Few doubted, and there were unpleasant tales of transference of these rites into the Sibylla Pleasant? Sibylla Pleasant? Hold on. I think I actually want to look this up. Hold up. Here, I'll take you with me. Sibylla. Fuck. I can't spell either. Sibylla Pleasant. Sibyl Pleasant. No, that's not it. Oh, wait, maybe it is. Sibyl. Wait, how's it spelled? I lost my place. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Nobody go anywhere. I can't read. I can't spell. Fiends and werewolves. And this priory, juridical, indestructible rights. Okay. Cybele Pleasant. What is that word? Sibyl cult, ancient Greek, or Phrygian real. Oh, maybe this is it. Maybe that's what he means. What if I search for that specifically? Okay, that doesn't help me. What does it mean? Cyberwax. Cyberwax. There we go. The Cyberwax cult. Sibyl cult. A great Phrygian mother of the gods and goddess of motherhood, fertility, and the mountain wilds. Her orgiastic cult dominated the central and northwestern regions of Anatolia and was introduced to Greece via the island of Samothrace. Kelly was identified as a number of Greek goddesses, including In sculpture, he was depicted as a matronly woman in a turret crowd seated on a throne flanked by lions. The I don't think we need to read about the orgies of Metatheon. Do we? Do we need to read about the orgies of Metatheon? I don't think we need to look. You can all look up. You can look that up yourself. I don't think we need to know. I don't think we need to know. Okay, let's keep going. Cyberwax was one of the search results. I didn't notice. Alright, where was I? Druidical, anti-druidical, Stonehenge, Spellical worship, which the Romans had introduced. Inscriptions still visible in the subcellar bore such unmistakable letters as DIV, OPS, MAGNA, MAT, sign of the Magna Mater, whose dark worship was once vainly forbidden to Roman citizens. Anchester had been the camp of the Third Augustine Legion, as many remains attest, and it was said that the temple of Cybele was splendid and thronged with worshippers who performed nameless ceremonies at the bidding of the Phrygian priest. Tales added that the fall of the old religion did not end with the orgies of the temple, but that the priest lived on in new faith without real change. Likewise, was it said that the rites did not vanish with the Roman power, and that certain among the Saxons added to what remained of the temple and gave it an essential outline subsequently preserved, making it the center of cult feared throughout half of the Heptarchy. Half of the Heptarchy. About 1000 AD, the place is mentioned in a chronicle as being a substantial stone priory, housing a strange and powerful monastic order, and surrounded by extensive gardens which needed no walls to exclude a frightened populace. It was never destroyed by the Danes, though after the Norman conquest it must have declined tremendously, since there was no impediment when Henry III granted the site to my ancestor, Gilbert de la Poer, first Baron Exum in 1261. I'm boring as fuck. I'm talking about real estate and history, and I'm kind of waiting for the rats. Where are the rats? When are we gonna get to the rats? The rats are in the walls, but we're still not at the walls yet. We're still talking about this dude's stupid blood history in 1811 to 1612 Donkulus. Whoop-de-ding-dong-do. Of my family before this date there is no evil report, but something strange must have happened then. In one chronicle there is a reference to a de la Poer as cursed of God in 1307, whilst village legendary has nothing but evil and frantic fear to tell of the castle that went up on the foundations of the old temple and priory. The fireside tales were one of mostly grisly description, all of the ghastlier because of their frightened reticence and cloudy evasiveness. They represented my ancestors as a race of hereditary demons, besides whom Giles de Retz and the Marquis de Sade would seem the veriest tyros, and hinted whisperingly at their responsibility for the occasional disappearances of villagers throughout several generations. I'm talking about a heritage that I don't celebrate any cultural traditions from, and I won't tell my children, so my culture will become not but a chain of property labels. That's like a slur for else. Wait, what? Wait, what's the word? Wait a minute. Did I just say it out loud? Curse to God. Okay, Desaad. Tyros? Is it Tyros? Talking about culture is a slur because he hates culture. Oh, okay. It's like a slur for Lovecraft. Lovecraft's talking about culture is a slur because he hates culture. This man hates culture. If I recall, he was a major like Anglophile. Like he was like, oh man, he was an England fanboy. Like in America, he was like, oh man, England. Oh, England's so fucking cool. I love England. They have cool shit in England, like being English. How dare he's like, oh man, he was like No, that's pretty much it. I already said the right word. He's basically just a fanboy for English things. Crap. I lost my place again. Um, Cursed of God. While Spillage and nothing is marching aside. The worst characters apparently were the barons and their direct heirs. At least most was whispered about these. If of healthier inclinations it was said, an heir would early and mysteriously die to make way for another more typical scion. There seemed to be an inner cult in the family, presided over by the head of the house, and sometimes closed except to a few members. Temperament rather than ancestry was evidently the basis of this cult, for it was entered by several who married into the family. Lady Margaret Trevor from Cornwall, wife of Godry, the second son of the fifth Baron, third cousin once removed to Terry, uh, divorced from Lady Fartbutt, second, third removed cousin of Squinkus Dinkelberg, um, became a favorite bane of children all over the countryside, and the demon heroine of a particularly horrible old ballad, not yet extinct near the Welsh border. Preserved in balladry, too, though not illustrating the same point, it is the hideous tale of Lady Mary Delacour, who shortly after her marriage to the Earl of Shrewsfield was killed by him and his mother, both the slayers being absolved and blessed by a priest to whom they confessed what they dared not repeat to the world. These myths and ballads, typical as they were of the crude superstition, repelled me greatly. Their persistence and their application so long a line of my ancestors were especially annoying, whilst the imputations and monstrous habits proved unpleasantly reminiscent of the known scandal of my immediate forebears, the case of my cousin, young Randolph Delapour of Carfax, sponsored by Carfax. Get your cars from Carfax. HP Lovecraft, sponsored by Carfax. Who went among the and became a voodoo priest after he returned from the Mexican War. I was much less disturbed by the vaguer tales of wails and howling in the barren, windswept valley beneath the limestone cliff, of the graveyard stenches after the spring rains, of the floundering, squealing white thing on which Sir John's Clave's horse had trod on one night in the lonely field, and of a servant who had gone mad at what he saw in the priory in the full light of day. These things were hackneyed spectral lore, and I was at that time a pronounced skeptic. The accounts of vanished peasants were less to be dismissed, though not especially significant in view of the medieval custom. Prying curiosity meant death, and more than one severed head could have been publicly shown on the bastions, now effaced, around Exham Priory. Teaboo. I love that's great. I love that term. H.P. Lovecraft, professional Teaboo. A few of the tales were exceedingly picturesque, and made me wish I had learnt more of the contemporary comparative mythology in my youth. There was, for instance, the belief that a legion of bat-winged devils kept witches' Sabbath each night at the priory, a legion whose sustenance might explain the disproportionate abundance of coarse vegetables harvested in the vast gardens. And most vivid of all, there was the dramatic epic of the rats, the scampering army of obscene vermin which had burst forth from the castle 3 months after the tragedy that doomed it to desertion. The lean, filthy, ravenous army, which had swept all before it devoured fowls, swept all before it had devoured fowl, cats, dogs, hogs, sheep, and even two hapless human beings before its fury was spent. Around that unforgettable rodent army a whole separate cycle of myths and revolves, for it scattered among the village homes and brought curses and horrors in its train. Such was the lore that assailed me as I pushed to completion with an elderly obstinacy the work of restoring my ancestral home. It must not be imagined for a moment that these tales formed my principal psychological environment. On that other hand, I was constantly praised and encouraged by Captain Norris and the antiquarians who surrounded and aided me. When the task was done over 2 years after its commencement, I viewed the great rooms, wainscoted walls, vaulted ceilings, mullioned windows, and broad staircases with a pride which fully compensated for the prodigious expense of the restoration. Every attribute of the Middle Ages was cunningly reproduced, and the new parts blended perfectly with the original walls of the foundation. I also had a closet installed for all of my Bad Dragon dildos. I had them all just arranged by size in my dildo closet. I had it just right there. It's very visible. Everyone can see it. You walk in and you see my dragon dildos right there, just sitting there in the closet, totally open. Everyone can see them. I'm bored, which is why I'm interjecting shit into it. Our venerable house, opulent and imperial. It looks like it's a house for nerds. For absolute dork lords. Uh, the seat of my fathers was complete, and I looked forward to redeeming at last the local fame, the line which ended with me. I would reside here permanently, and prove that a Delapore, for I had adopted again the original spelling of the name, need not be a feat. My comfort was perhaps augmented by the fact that, although Exon Priory was medievally fitted, its interior was in truth a wholly new and free from old vermin and ghosts alike. As I have said, I moved in July 16th, 1923. My household consisted of 7 servants and 9 cats, of which I latter species I am particularly fond of. My eldest cat, Batman, was 7 years old and had come with me from my home in Bolton, Massachusetts. The others I had accumulated whilst living with Captain Norris's family during the restoration of the priory. For 5 days, our routine proceeded with the utmost placidity, my time being spent mostly in the codification of old family data. I had now obtained some very circumstantial accounts of the final tragedy and flight of the Walter de la Pore, which I conceived that to be a probable contents of the hereditary paper lost in the fire at Carfax, sponsored by Carfax. It appeared that my ancestor was accused with much reason of having killed all the other members of his household, except 4 servant confederates, in their sleep, about 2 weeks after a shocking discovery which changed his whole demeanor, but which, except by implication, he disclosed no one save perhaps the servants who assisted him afterward fled beyond reach. I have no idea what the fuck he's saying. Um, oh, that's a reference to Darkest Dungeon. Okay. Oh, you know what? I remember now. Our venerable house, opulent and imperial. You're gonna big die, because Darkest Dungeon's really hard. The deliberate slaughter, which included a father, 3 brothers, and 2 sisters, was largely condoned by the villagers and so slackly treated by the law that its perpetrator escaped honored, unharmed, and undisguised to Virginia, the general whispered sentiment being that he had purged the land of an immemorial curse. What discovery had prompted an act so terrible I could scarcely even conjecture. Walter de la Pore must have known for years the sinister tales about this family, so that this material could have given him no fresh impulse. Had he then witnessed some appalling ancient rite, or stumbled upon some frightful and revealing symbol in the priory or its vicinity? He is reputed to have been a shy, gentle youthling, but in Virginia he seemed not so much hard or bitter or harassed and apprehensive. He was spoken of in the diary of another gentleman adventurer, Francis Harvey of Bellevue, as a man of unexampled justice, honor, and delicacy. On July 22nd, that's my birthday! July 22nd is my birthday! Lovecraft remembered my birthday! My birthday is July 22nd. You remember my birthday? On July 22nd occurred the first incident, which, though lightly dismissed at the time, takes on a preternatural significance in relation to later events. It was so simple as to be almost negligible, and could not possibly have been noticed under the circumstances, for it must be recalled that since I was in a building practically fresh and new except for the walls, and surrounded by a well-balanced staff of servitors, apprehension would have been absurd despite the locality. What I afterward remembered is merely this, that my old black cat, whose moods I know so well, was undoubtedly alert and anxious to an extent wholly out of keeping with his natural character. He roved from room to room, restless and disturbed, and sniffed constantly about the walls which formed part of the old Gothic structure. I realize how trite this sounds, like the inevitable dog in the ghost story, which always growls before his master sees the sheeted figure, yet I cannot consistently suppress it. The following day, a servant complained of restlessness among all the cats in the house. He came to me in my study, a lofty west room on the second story, with groined arches, black oak paneling, and a triple Gothic window overlooking the limestone cliff and desolate valley. And even as he spoke, I saw the jetty form of Batman creeping along the west wall and scratching at the new panels which overlaid the ancient stone. I told the man that there must be some singular odor or emanation from the old stonework, imperceptible to human senses, but affecting the delicate organs of cats even through the woodwork. This I truly believed, and when the fellow suggested the presence of mice or rats, I mentioned that there had been no rats for 300 years, and that even the field mice of the surrounding country could hardly be found in these high walls, where they had never been known to stray. That afternoon, I called Captain Norris, and he assured me that it would be quite incredible for field mice to infest the priory in such a sudden and unprecedented fashion. Good old Batman, my favorite cat. Yeah, I'm not saying that cat's name out loud. Nuh-uh. Nuh-uh, no way. Not doing it. Can't convince me. That night, dispensing as usual with a valet, I retired into the west tower chamber which I had chosen as my own, reached from the study by a stone staircase and short gallery, the former partly ancient, the latter entirely restored. This room was circular, very high, and without wainscoting, being hung with arras which I had myself chosen in London. Seeing that Batman was with me, I shut a heavy Gothic door and retired by the light of the electric bulbs which so cleverly counterfeited candles, finally switching off the light and sinking onto the curved and canopied four-poster, with the venerable cat in his accustomed place across my feet. I did not draw the curtains, but gazed out the narrow north window which I faced. There was a suspicion of an aurora in the sky, and the delicate traceries of the window were pleasantly silhouetted. At some time I must have fallen quietly asleep, for I recall a distinct sense of leaving strange dreams when the cat started violently from his placid position. I saw him in the faint auroral glow, head strained forward, 4 feet on my ankles, and hind feet stretched behind. He was looking intensely at a point on the wall, somewhat west of the window, a point which my eye had nothing to mark it, but toward which all my attention was now directed. And as I watched, I knew that Batman was not vainly excited. Whether the R's actually moved, I cannot say. I think it did, very slightly. But what I can swear to it is that behind it I heard a low, distinct scurrying as of rats or mice. In a moment, the cat had jumped bodily on the screaming tapestry, bringing the affected section to the floor with his weight and exposing a damp, ancient wall of stone, patched here and there by the restorers and devoid of any trace of rodent prowlers. Batman raced up and down the floor by this part of the wall, clawing the fallen R's and seemingly trying at times to insert a paw between the wall and the oaken floor. He found nothing, and after a time returned wearily to his place across my feet. I had not moved, but I did not sleep again that night. In the morning, I questioned all the servants, and found that none of them had noticed anything unusual, save for the cook remembered the actions of a cat which had rested on her windowsill. This cat had howled at some unknown hour of the night, awaking the cook in time for her to see him dart purposely out of the open door down the stairs. I drowsed away the noontime, and in the afternoon called again on Captain Norris, who became exceedingly interested in what I told him. The odd incidents, so slight yet so curious, appealed to a sense of the picturesque and elicited from him a number of reminiscences of local ghostly lore. We were genuinely perplexed at the presence of rats, and Norris lent me some traps and Paris green, which I had the servants place in strategic localities when I returned. Paris green. I wonder if Paris green is like a type of bait. This man has never owned a cat. I don't know. I think that Lovecraft probably did own cats. He does seem to have a bit of an affinity for them. But but I don't think he owned them well. Oh, it's a poison? Oh, okay. The Paris Green. I retired early, being very sleepy, but was harassed by dreams of the most horrible sort. I seemed to be looking down from an immense height upon a twilight grotto, knee-deep with filth, where a white-bearded demon swineherd drove about with his staff a flock of funguous, flabby beasts whose appearance filled me with an unutterable loathing. Then, as the swineherd paused and nodded over his task, a mighty swarm of rats rained down on the stinking abyss and fell to the devouring beasts and man alike. From this terrific vision, I was abruptly awakened by the motions of Batman, who had been sleeping as usual across my feet. This time, I did not have to question the source of his snarls and hisses, and of the fear which made him sink his claws into my ankle. Conscious of their effect, for on every side of the chamber the walls were alive with nauseous sound, the verminous slithering of ravenous gigantic rats. There was now no aurora to show the taste of the auras, the fallen section of which had been replaced, but I was not too frightened to switch on the light. As the bulbs leapt into radiance, I saw a hideous shaking all over the tapestry, causing the somewhat peculiar designs to exude a singular dance of death. This motion disappeared almost at once, and the sound with it. Springing out of bed, I poked at the auras with the long handle of a warming pan that rested near, and lifted one section to see what lay beneath. There was nothing but the patched stone wall, and even the cat had lost its tense realization of abnormal presences. When I examined the circular trap that had been placed in the room, I found all of the openings sprung, though no trace remained of what had been caught and escaped. Further sleep was out of the question, so lighting a candle, I opened the door and went out into the gallery toward the stairs to my study, Batman following at my heels. My cat stares at walls, wails at odd times, and paws at things. Gotta be demon mice. I'm gonna ask my cat that later when she starts like going nuts. When she gets the zoomies, I'm gonna be like, "Oh, there's demon mice in the walls. We got demon mice." uh, Before we had reached the stone steps, however, the cat darted ahead of me and vanished down the ancient flight. As I descended the stairs myself, I became suddenly aware of sounds in the great room below, sounds of a nature which could not be mistaken. The oak-paneled walls were alive with rats, scampering and milling, whilst Batman was racing about with the fury of a baffled hunter. Reaching the bottom, I switched on the light, which did not this time cause the noise to subside. The rats continued their riot, stampeding with such force and distinctness that I could finally assign to their motions a definite direction. These creatures, in numbers apparently inexhaustible, were engaged in one stupendous migration from inconceivable heights to some depth, conceivably or inconceivably below. I now heard steps in the corridor. In another moment, two servants pushed open the massive door. They were searching the house for some unknown source of disturbance, which had thrown all the cats into a snarling panic and caused them to plunge precipitately down several flights of stairs and squat yowling before the closed door to the subcellar. I asked them if they had heard the rats, but they replied in the negative, and when I turned to call their attention to the sounds in the panels, I realized that the noise had ceased. With the two men, I went down to the door of the subcellar, but found the cats had already dispersed. Later, I resolved to explore the crypt below, but for the present, I merely made a round of the traps. All were sprung, yet all were tenantless. Satisfying myself that no one had heard the rats save for the felines and me, I sat in my study until morning, thinking profoundly, and recalling every scrap of legend I had unearthed concerning the building I had inhabited. I slept some in the forenoon, leaning back in one comfortable library chair, which my medieval plan of furnishing could not banish. Later, I telephoned Captain Norris, who came over and helped me explore the subcellar. Absolutely nothing untoward was found, although we could not repress a thrill at the knowledge that the vault was built by Roman hands. Every low arch and massive pillar was Roman. Not the debased Romanesque of the bungling Saxons, but the severe and harmonious classicism of the age of the Caesars. Indeed, the walls abound with inscriptions familiar to the antiquarians who had repeatedly explored the place. Things like P, Pigite, Prop Temp Dana, and Leprec versus Pontife Atis. Uh, one of them, the most interesting one, just said, LOL, you're gay. What could the ancient Romans possibly mean with this ancient text that says, uh, get stick bugged? what is what is lost.date.jpg and the odd marks that lay beneath it? What if you'd saw something that says LOL you're gay? They know I'm gay. The reference to a tease made me shiver, for I had read Catullus and knew something of the hideous rites of the Eastern god, whose worship was so mixed with that of Svel. Norris and I, by the light of the lanterns, tried to interpret the odd and nearly effaced designs on certain irregularly rectangular books of stone generally held to be altars, but could make nothing of them. We remembered that one pattern, a sort of rayed sun, was held by students to imply a non Roman origin, suggesting that these altars had merely been adopted by the Roman priest from some older and perhaps aboriginal temple on the same site. On one of these blocks were some brown stains, which made me wonder, did they poop real hard? Did they come in here and just absolutely blast the dookie? Um I'm fantastic at comedy. Everybody's laughing. Everybody liked the poop joke. Uh, the largest in the center of the room had certain features on this upper surface which indicated its connection with fire, probably burnt offerings. Such were the sights in that crypt, before whose door the cats had howled, and where Norris and I now determined to pass the night. Couches were brought down by several servants, who were told not to mind any nocturnal actions of the cats, and Batman, who was admitted as much for help as much for companionship. We decided to keep the great oak door, a modern replica with slits for ventilation, tightly closed, and with this attended to, we retired with lanterns still burning to await whatever might occur. The vault was very deep in the foundations of the priory, and undoubtedly far down on the face of the beetling limestone cliff overlooking the waste valley. That it had been the goal of the scuffling and unexplainable rats I could not doubt, though why I could not tell. As we lay there expectantly, we explored each other's body. No, me did Delapore and Captain Norris ever explore each other's bodies in the rat cellar? What if we set up a couch in the rat cellar and we kissed and we were both boys? What if we were both the same gender in the rat cellar and we kissed? The vault was very expectedly. I found my vigil occasionally mixed with half-formed dreams, from which the uneasy motions of the cat across my feet would rouse me. These dreams were not wholesome, but horribly like the one I had had the night before. I saw again the Twilight Grotto, and the swineherd with its unmentionable fungus beasts wallowing in filth. As I looked at these things, they seemed nearer and more distinct, so distinct that I could almost observe their features. Then I did observe the flabby features of one of them, and awakened with such a scream that Batman started up, whilst Captain Norris, who had not slept, laughed considerably. Norris might have laughed more, or perhaps less, had he known what it was that made me scream. But I did not remember myself until later. Ultimate horror often paralyzes memory in a merciful way. Norris waked me when the phenomena began. Out of the same frightful dream, I was called by his gentle shaking and his urging to listen to the cats. Indeed, there was much to listen to, for beyond the closed door at the head of the stone steps was a veritable nightmare of feline yelling and clawing, whilst Batman, unmindful of his kindred outside, was running excitedly around the bare stone walls, in which I heard the same babble of scurrying rats that had troubled me the night before. An acute terror now rose within me, for here were anomalies which, nothing normal could well explain. These rats, if not the creatures of madness which I'd share with cats alone, must be burrowing and sliding in Roman walls I had thought to be of solid limestone blocks, unless perhaps the action of water through more than 17 centuries had eaten winding tunnels which rodent bodies had worn clear and ample. But even so, the spectral horror was no less. For if these were living vermin, why did not Norris hear their disgusting commotion? Why did he urge me to watch Batman and listen to the cats outside? Why did he guess wildly and vaguely at what could possibly have aroused them? By the time I had managed to tell him, as rationally as I could, what I thought I was hearing, my ears gave me the last fading impression of the scurry, which had retreated still downward, far underneath the deepest of the subcellars, till it seemed as if the whole cliff below were riddled with questing rats. Norris was not as skeptical as I had anticipated, but instead seemed profoundly moved. He motioned to me to notice that the cats at the door had ceased their clamor, as if giving up the rats for lost, whilst Batman had a burst of renewed restlessness, and was clawing frantically at the bottom of the large stone altar in the center of the room, which was nearer Norris's couch than mine. My fear of the unknown was at this point very great. Something astounding had occurred, and I saw Captain Norris, a younger, stouter, and presumably more naturally materialistic man, was affected fully as much as myself, perhaps because of his lifelong intimate familiarity with local legend. We could, for the moment, do nothing but watch the old black cat as he pawed with decreasing fervor at the base of the altar, occasionally look up and mewingly at me to in that persuasive manner which he used to wish. Damn it. Occasionally looking up at me and mewing to me in that persuasive manner which he used when he wished me to perform some favor for him. Norris now took a lantern close to the altar and examined the place where Batman was pawing, silently kneeling and scraping away at the lichens of centuries, which joined the massive pre-Roman block tessellated to the tessellated floor. He did not find anything, and was about to abandon his efforts when I noticed a trivial circumstance which made me shudder, even though it implied nothing more than I had already imagined. I told him of it, and we both looked at its almost imperceptible manifestation with with the fixedness of a fascinated discovery and acknowledgement. It was only this, that the flame of the lantern set down near the altar was slightly, but certainly flickering from the draught of air which it had not before received, and which came indubitably from the crevice between the floor and altar, where Norris's was scraping away at the lichens. We spent the rest of the night in the brilliantly lighted study, nervously discussing what we should do next. The discovery that some vault deeper than the deepest known masonry of the Romans underlay this accursed pile, some vaults unsuspected by the curious antiquarians of 3 centuries, would have been sufficient to excite us, without any background of the sinister. As it was, the fascination became twofold, and we paused in doubt whether to abandon our search and quit the priory forever in superstitious caution, or to gratify our sense of adventure and brave whatever horrors might await us in the unknown depths. By morning, we had compromised and decided to go to London to gather a group of archaeologists and scientific men fit to cope with the mystery. And it should be mentioned that before leaving the subcellar, we had vainly tried to move the central altar, which we now recognized as the gate to the new pit of nameless fear. What secret would open the gate, wiser men than we would have to find? During many days in London, Captain Norris and I presented our facts, conjectures, and legendary anecdotes to 5 eminent authorities, all men who could be trusted to respect any family disclosures which future explorations might develop. We found most of them little disposed to scoff, but instead intently interested and sincerely sympathetic. It was hardly necessary to name them all, but I may say that they included Sir William Brinton, whose excavations in the Troad excited most of the world in their day. As we all took the train for Manchester, I felt myself poised on the brink of frightful revelations, a sensation symbolized by the air of mourning among the many Americans at the unexpected death of the president on the other side of the world. On the evening of August 7th, we reached Exham Priory, where the servants assured me that nothing unusual had occurred. The cats, even old Batman, had been perfectly placid, and not a trap in the house had been sprung. We were to begin exploring on the following day, awaiting which I had signed well-appointed rooms to all my guests. I myself retired to my own chamber, with Batman across my feet. Sleep came quickly, but hideous dreams assailed me. There was a vision of a Roman feast like that of Trimalchio, with a horror in covered platter. Then came that damnable recurring thing about the swineherd and his filthy drove in the Twilight Grotto. Yet when I awoke, it was full daylight, with normal sounds in the house below. The rats, living or spectral, had not troubled me, and Batman was still quietly asleep. On going down, I found that the same tranquillity had prevailed elsewhere, a condition which one of the assembled savants, a fellow named Thornton, devoted to a psychic rather absurdly laid to the fact that I had now been shown the thing which certain forces had wished to show me. Oh, God, you're boring. Okay, hold on. I need some water. I need some tongs for this word salad. Oh my god. Get to the fucking point. Ugh. All was now ready, and at 11 a.m., our entire group of 7 men, bearing powerful electric searchlights and implements of excavation, went down to the subcellar and bolted the door behind us. Batman was with us, for the investigators found no occasion to despise his excitability, and were indeed anxious were indeed anxious that he be present in case of obscure rodent manifestations. This is like Bad Internet Stories 101. Oh my god. It's not. It's not a no sleep story, but boy, is it just like, let's use like 100 bajillion words to say there's fucking rats in the walls. We went to town. We got some dudes, and we came back, and we're gonna fucking excavate the fucking hole in the basement. Oy, oy. Oh god, where was I? Anything. Perfectly placid, and not a trip in the house we sprung. We were to begin exploring the following day, awaiting which I assigned well-appointed rooms to all my guests. I myself retired in my own chamber, with Batman across my feet. Sleep came quickly, but hid it. Oh, right. Okay, we talked about the dreams. Yet when I awoke, everything was totally cool. On going down, I found that same tranquility prevailed elsewhere, a condition which one of the assembled savants, a fellow. Okay, yeah, he was like, "Oh, you were getting psychic visions about shit in your dreams," and I'm like, "Oh, that's stupid. You're dumb, and I hate you. You're ugly. Give me $200." All now was ready, and at 11 a.m., our entire group of 7 men, bearing powerful electric searchlights and implements of excavation, went down into the subcellar and bolted the door behind us. Batman was with Batman was with us, for the investigators found no occasion to despise his excitability, and were indeed anxious that he be present in case of obscure rodent manifestations. We noted the Roman inscriptions and unknown altar designs only briefly, for 3 of the savants had already seen them, and all knew their characteristics. Prime attention was paid to the momentous central altar, and within an hour Sir William Brinton had caused it to tilt backward, balanced by some unknown species of counterweight. There now lay revealed such a horror as would have overwhelmed us had we not been prepared. Through the nearly square opening in the tiled floor, sprawling on a flight of stone steps so prodigiously worn that it was little more than an inclined plane at the center, was a ghastly array of human or semi-human bones. Those which retained their collocation as skeletons showed attitudes of panic, fear, and over were all marks of rodent gnawing. The skulls denoted nothing short of utter idiocy, cretinism, or primitive semi-apedom. Oh, fuck you. I know what he's saying. Fuck you. Fuck you and your, What's that? What's that old defunct, practice in psychiatry where it's all like phrenology? I think that's what it is, where you're like measuring parts of a dude's head. And they're like, oh, you have this big fat lump in the back of your head. That means that you're very smart. Or you've got a weird forehead. That means your penis is very small. Lovecraft. So phrenology was totally legit. It's totally legit, you guys. Phrenology. You measure someone's head, you realize, they're smart. Oy, oy, oy. Uh, um, bu- 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 Above the hellishly littered steps arched a descending passage, seemingly chiseled from the solid rock, and conducting a current of air. This current was not sudden, a noxious rush from a closed vault, but a cool breeze with something of freshness in it. We did not pause long, but shiveringly began to clear a passage down the steps. It was then that Sir William, examining the hewn walls, made the odd observation that the passage, according to the direction of the strokes, must have been made chiseled from beneath. I must be very deliberate now and choose my words. After plowing down a few steps amidst the gnawed bones, we saw that there was a light ahead, not any mystic phosphorescence, but a filtered daylight which could not come except from unknown fissures in the cliff that overlooked the waste valley. That such fissures had escaped notice from outside was hardly remarkable, for not only is this valley wholly uninhabited, but the cliff is so high and beetling that only an aeronaut could study its face in detail. A few steps more, and our breaths were literally snatched from us by what we saw. So literally that Thornton, the psychic investigator, actually fainted in the arms of the dazed man who stood behind him. I ship them now. The psychic and whoever caught him, you two are together. I ship you. It was high science back then. Ugh, yeah. Fucking. There reminds me. There's like a Simpsons clip where like Mr. Burns is like, "Oh, you have the brain pan of an ignoramus." He pulls out the thing. Smithers is like, phrenology was dismissed years ago. If you'd say that, you have the brain pan of a Neanderthal. Anyway. Ugh. Peak comedy. I describe Simpsons quotes to you. Where was I? Norris, his plump face utterly white and flabby. Not in the 20s. Like, I'm pretty sure it was dismissed a while before then. Huh. Well, you know what? You know what? Just for, let's go on a field trip real quick. Phrenology. Flash bomb. Um, Racism. Yeah, I'll fucking bet. Let's see. Discipline was influential in the 19th century, especially from about 1810 until 1840. Principal British Center for Phrenology was in Edinburgh, where Edinburgh Phrenological Society was established in 1820. While phrenology itself has long been discredited, the study of inner surface of skulls of archaic human species allows modern researchers to obtain information about the development of various areas of the brain and those species, and thereby infer something about their cognitive and communicative abilities, and possibly even something about their social life. The imitation technique is sometimes criticized as paleophrenology. Is there like let's see. Okay, so it largely lost credibility in the 1840s. So it was bunked like way long time ago. It was big time bunked. It was biggie bunked. Biggie bunkalunked. Whoopsie. Where is my button that I push to go back? I am here now. Anyway, Lovecraft in the fucking 20s was still like, yo, phrenology though. Love it. Those dudes don't know what they're these modern doctors, they don't know what they're talking about. Phrenology is where it's at. Uh, Norris, his plump face utterly white and flabby, simply cried out inarticulately. Whilst I think whilst I think that what I did was to gasp or hiss and cover my eyes, the man behind me, the only one of the party older than I, croaked a hackneyed, "My God," in the most cracked voice I ever heard. Of 7 cultivated men, only Sir William Brinton retained his composure, a thing the more to his credit because he led the party, and must have seen the sight first. It was a twilight grotto of enormous height, stretching away farther than any eye could see, a subterraneous world of limitless mystery and horrible suggestion. There were buildings and other architectural remains. In one terrified glance, I saw a weird pattern of tumuli, a savage circle of monoliths, a low domed Roman ruin, a sprawling Saxon pile, an early English edifice of wood, but all these were dwarfed by the ghoulish spectacle presented by the general surface of the ground. For yards and the steps extended an insane tangle of human bones, or bones at least as human as those on the steps. Like the foamy sea they stretched, some fallen apart, but others wholly or partly articulated as skeletons. These latter invariably the postures of of demonic frenzy, either fighting off some menace or clutching other forms with cannibal intent. Yeah, finally now we're somewhere fun. It only took us ages to get there. When Dr. Trask, the anthropologist, stooped to classify the skulls, he found a degraded mixture which utterly baffled him. They were mostly lower than the Piltdown man in the scale of evolution, but in the every case definitely human. Many were of higher grade, and very few were the skulls of supremely and sensitively developed types. All the bones were gnawed, mostly by rats, but somewhat by others of the half-human drove. Mixed with them were many tiny bones of rats, fallen members of the lethal army which closed the ancient epoch. I wonder that any man among us had kept his sanity through the hideous day of discovery. Not Hoffman or Heisman's could conceive a scene more wildly incredible, more frenetically repellent, or more gothically grotesque than the twilight grotto through which we seven staggered, each stumbling on revelation after revelation, after trying to keep for the nonce from thinking of events which must have taken place there 300 or even 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 years ago. It was the antechamber of hell. The poor Thornton fainted again when Trask told him that some of the skeleton things must have descended as quadrupeds through the last 20 or more generations. Horror piled on horror as we began to interpret the architectural remains. The quadrupeded things, with their occasional recruits from the biped class, had been kept in stone pens, out of which they must have broken in their last delirium of hunger or rat fear. There have been great herds of them, evidently flattened on the coarse vegetables, whose remains could be found as sort of a poisonous ensilage at the bottom of the huge stone bins older than Rome. I knew now why my ancestors had such an excessive gardens. Had a sex. Now I knew now why my ancestors had such excessive gardens. Would to heaven I could forget. The purpose of the herds I did not have to ask. Sir William, standing with his searchlight in the Roman ruin, or standing in the Roman Reigns WrestleMania. Tra- uh, and I'm running out of steam, so I'm lowering my quality of jokes and references. Searchlight in the Roman ruin, which translated aloud the most shocking ritual I have ever known, and told by the diet of the Antediluvian cult, which the priest of Cybele found and mingled with their own. Norris, used as he was to the trenches, could not walk straight when he came out of the English building. It was a butcher shop and kitchen. He had expected that, but it was too much to see the familiar English implements in such a place. And to read familiar English graffiti here, some as recent as 1610. I could not go in that building whose demon activities were stopped only by the dagger of my ancestor Walter de Boer. What I did venture to enter was the low Saxon building, whose oaken door had fallen, and there I found a terrible row of 10 stone cells with rusty bars. 3 had tenants, all skeletons of high grade, and on the bony forefinger of one I found a seal ring with my own coat of arms. Sir William found a vault with far older cells below the Roman chapel, but these cells were empty. Below them was a low crypt with cases of formerly arranged bones, some of them bearing terrible parallel inscriptions carved in Latin, Greek, and the tongue of Phrygia. Meanwhile, Dr. Trask had opened one of the prehistoric tumuli and brought to light skulls which were slightly more human than a gorilla's and which bore indescribable ideographic carvings. Through all this horror, my cat stalked unperturbed. Once I saw him monstrously perched on top of a mountain of bones and wondered at the secrets that might lie behind his yellow eyes. Having grasped to some slight degree the frightful revelations of this twilight area, an area so hideously foreshadowed by my recurrent dream, we turned to that apparently boundless depth of Midnight Cavern, where no ray of light from this cliff could penetrate. We shall never know what sightless Stygian worlds yawned beyond the little distance we went, for it was decided that such secrets are not good for mankind. But there were plenty to engross us close at hand, for we had not far before the searchlights showed that accursed infinity of pits in which the rats had feasted, and those sudden hold on a second. And whose sudden lack of replenishment had driven the ravenous rodent army first to turn on the living herds of starving things, and then to burst forth from the priory in that historic orgy of devastation which the peasants will never forget. God, those carrion black pits of sawed, picked bones and open skulls, those nightmare chasms choked with the pithecanthropoid Celtic, Roman, and English bones of countless unhallowed centuries. Some of them were full, and none can say how deep they had once been. Others were still bottomless to our searchlights, and peopled by unnameable fancies. What I thought of the hapless rats that stumbled into such traps amidst blackness in their quests this grisly Tartarus. Once my foot stepped near a horribly yawning brink, and I had a moment of ecstatic fear. I must have been musing a long time, for I could not see any of the party but the plump Captain Norris. Then there came a sound from the inky boundless, farther distance than I thought I knew, and I saw my old black cat dart past me like a winged Egyptian god, straight into the illimitable gulf of the unknown. But I was not far behind, for there was no doubt after another second. It was the eldritch scurrying of those fiend-born rats, always questing for new horrors, and determined to lead me onto even unto the, blah, 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 and determined to lead me on even unto those grinning caverns of Earth's center, where Nyarlathotep, the mad faceless god, housed blindly in the darkness to the piping of the two amorphous idiot flute players. That's interesting that he just I that's interesting he just name drops Nyarlathotep like that. That's odd. Cause like Nyarlathotep, that's kind of a major player in like Lovecraftian god lore. Yeah, he just does. That's right. He does do that sometimes. In fact, now that I think about it, I think this is probably the first occurrence of that name, and that he did it mostly as a placeholder, and then like other people started to ascribe like meaning to it. Like other authors, I think, started to give that name uh, something to it. Yeah, it's pretty open. Lovecraftian lore is pretty open source. Uh, My searchlight expired, but still I ran. I heard voices and yowls and echoes, but above all there gently rose that impious, insidious scurrying, gently rising as a stiff, bloated corpse gently rises above an oily river that flows under endless onyx bridges to a black putrid sea. Something bumped into me, something soft and plump. It must have been the rats, the vicious, gelatinous, ravenous army that feasts on the dead and the living. Why shouldn't rats eat a Delapore as a Delapore eats forbidden things? The war ate my boy, damn them all, and the Yanks ate Carfax, sponsored by Carfax, with flames and burnt grandsire Delapore, and the secret. No, no, I tell you, I am not that demon swineherd at the Twilight Grotto. I was not Edward Norris's fat face on the flabby fungus thing. Who says I am a Delapore? He lived, but my boy died. Shall a Norris hold the lands of the Delapore? It's voodoo, I tell you. That spotted snake, curse you, Thornton. I'll teach you to faint at what my family do. Splud, thou stinkard. Ain't I a stinkard? I'll learn ye how to gust. Wold ye swank me thilk vise magna mater. What the hell? Excuse me, sharks. Excuse me, you are interrupting the finale of the story. You butt. Anyway. Curse you, Thornton. Magna Mater, Atis, Dira Akita, Ad Adavan, Aga, Ashton, course, with Donas, Aga Litsa Ungo. That is what they say. That is what they say I said when they found me in the blackness after 3 hours. Found me crouching in the blackness over the plump, half-eaten body of Captain Norris, with my own cat leaping and tearing at my throat. Now they have blown up Exon Priory, taken my Batman away from me, and shut me into this barred room at Hanwell, with fearless whispers about my heredity and experiences. Thornton is in the next room, but they prevent me from talking to him. They are trying, too, to suppress most of the facts concerning the Priory. When I speak of poor Norris, they accuse me of a hideous thing. But they must know I did not do it. They must know it was the rats, the slithering, scurrying rats whose scampering will never let me sleep, the demon rats that race behind the padding in this room and beckon me down to greater horrors than I have ever known. The rats, they can never hear the rats in the walls. Alright, that was Rats in the Walls. I hope everybody appreciated me changing the cat's name to Batman. Ugh. The end was fun. It was real family friendly. I like the interjections. Oh man. Okay, so that was actually really fun. That was really weirdly fun. Like I said, Lovecraft is really dry. It's kind of fun to like read it really dramatically, and I was really kind of getting into it at times and really kind of going for it. But he still takes a long time to say not a lot. You know, it's when he starts. It's when it starts to like, because like the last third of that story with yeah, I'm probably gonna look into stuff inspired by Lovecraft. There's a book that I'd really love to read on stream. Um, let me look it up real quick. I read this once before. I really want to find it again. There's a compilation of short stories called Shadows Over Baker Street, and Shadows Over Baker Street is a compilation of short stories that combine Sherlock Holmes and Lovecraft mythology. And I remember there's some good ass stories in there. A Study in Emerald was really good. There's Study in Emerald by Neil Gaiman. Um, there's one that I remember that involved like a it involved a Shoggoth that was posing as a person, and like part of the mystery was finding out like how do we how do we prove it? How do we prove that this isn't a real human being? And it involved them having to like find the corpse of the actual like victim that this Shoggoth was impersonating. So that was super cool. But yeah, I think I'd probably want to try and find some more stories inspired by Lovecraft. But we can also, I think, come back to this every now and again, similar to when we come back to like Goosebumps books, because I like dunking on this old racist weirdo. I like dunking on this Goobulus with various interjections. Oi, so dunking is fun. I like dunking. So, oh man, I will say that 100% killed my voice. So, I'm not going to take too long to wrap up the stream today. Thank you all for coming. This was fun. I think I'm just going to start making this an every Tuesday and Friday thing. I think we can safely do that. It gives me time to kind of rest my voice after each reading, and yeah, oof, man, I don't want to talk too much more. This really killed me. All right, everybody have a lovely evening. Thank you for coming. I will have the VOD up in a couple of hours if anyone missed anything. I will catch you all later. The stream is now out.